Be all live?
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Are we doing it live?
Oh, good. I don't have to wear pants anymore.
Doing it live.
Just let us know when we can yell penis.
Is there going to be lube?
Like Bill O'Reilly. Fuck it, we'll do it live.
I've got some Crisco.
Ounces of lube. Do you need it?
All right, I'm ready.
Oh, that was painful.
3 gallons of lube. You think it's 3 gallons, Scott?
Holy spackle, were you talking about S.J. Thomas a minute ago?
Yeah, she was.
Oh, okay. That's what I figured.
No, she's pretty cordial, I said.
Yeah,
she's
cordial.
extremely rude to people, too, that have just died in their family.
That's right.
I didn't see that. I've only seen it like twice.
Yeah, somebody being able to wait their turn to speak, not make them a good person to have a platform.
You have to follow her on Twitter, then you can see how fucked up she is.
Isn't she like a closet dominionist? Or am I thinking about another crazy blonde lady?
I don't know. Maybe I should interview her. I can find out.
I'll be nice to you in an interview.
I'd interview SJ. I don't know. Oh, I'm supposed to interview Max. Max said yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. I sent the text to Ned and I told him to hop in the Discord. I'm on Mrs. D's account because if I'm on my own phone, then yeah, I can't. It's not going to let anybody hear anything. So I'm not going to be around for much of this because this is date night. So feel free, folks, to give your unadulterated opinion about anything. Like I'll say right now, I told Ned, I was like, he's not going to go for, like, I like your illustration of your overall or overarching kind of schema as to how certain Christians have built their foundation as far as God's morality, but that's way too complex for him. That's way too nuanced. And we maybe can have a conversation with somebody with more than 6 brain cells to talk about that, right? But just like I knew was going to happen, he didn't understand it. He can't understand analogies. He can't understand metaphorical language. He can't understand nuance. So that's why the conversation made absolutely no traction. And I was hoping that Ned would eventually segue into just talking about specifically about normative ethics and going into that. And so that didn't happen. I think Ned kind of ended up just getting frustrated because it could make no traction, because I think in his mind, he wanted the initial conversation, or like phase 1 of his 3-legged illustration, to get to a certain point, then move into it. But as we see that didn't happen.
Sometimes I think G-Man has a bucket beside where he's sitting, and he'll just reach in and pull out slips of paper with things written on them, and then he'll just go ahead and blather about that, and he'll pick up another one and blather about that.
Maybe that's far too organized.
But I say G-Man can't read anyway, so
he can't write things on paper. Come on.
That's the Dave Chappelle tactic to formulating jokes.
Yeah, whose line is it anyways? Apologetics.
That's how you write the jokes for Family Guy.
No, my
it's like that breakfast machine I bought.
My concentration level was pretty poor during that.
Your constipation level.
But I said my concentration level. If you hear Scott commenting behind me, he's making fun of me.
I was like, I heard that. I was like, that's
your
funny.
concentration. But my number one troll is married to me. but my question is, like, I felt like every time G-Man made a point, he was missing the granting that Ned was doing, and we never really got to Ned's foundation ever, which is frustrating to me.
Well, you don't have to get to Ned's foundation with that topic. That's kind of the whole point. Is that what that topic was supposed to be? I guess. Like, first of all, that topic was just stupid to begin with.
Right.
Which is better, like Christian ethics or a secular ethic?
We have to agree.
I'm sorry, but any secular ethic can be consistent with a Christian framework. And so it could be incorporated as a Christian ethic. And so basically it was 99.99% of all of the ethical frameworks that are available or that could be possibly proposed are consistent with being religiously neutral, or they could be incorporated into Christianity.
Unless it's an anti-theistic.
Yeah, hence the 0.01%.
Oh yeah, that's why.
Or
I've,
one that thinks you shouldn't drown everyone.
Yeah.
I've made the point that you can be a Christian secularist. Like I'm a secularist in the sense I believe in separation between church and state. So I'm a secularist, right? But I'm not a secularist in every
God,
aspect of my
Headless.
life. It's silly. What?
Checking the Dragoon chat. He's been at it all night.
I just
I
don't
opened
think
the
that you
DVD
can.
generator.
You racist.
I don't think you can get some ethic that thinks it's okay to drown all the humans to jive with one that thinks human life should be preserved. That's just me, though. Drowning people usually kills them.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Well,
the first half of that I was going to ask, have you ever heard of Ayn Rand?
technically all the humans didn't drown, and then also you could argue is it a grotesque harm for a greater good? So
Well, the problem there is that it's not just, is it a grotesque harm? Like, a grotesque harm for a greater good. Is it a necessary harm?
When you can snap your fingers and make a universe, nothing.
Well, you don't have to snap your fingers at that point. It's just,
yeah,
you could have not made them in the first place.
right.
And that goes back to the Sartre and the John Calvin dilemma that, ironically, the two of those individuals agreed upon, which was either God is free or man is free.
I'll never forget the look on the face of the libertarian who I told Ayn Rand was on welfare.
No, she was on social insurance. That's what it was.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah.
Which actually, like, a lot of people chastise her for, but it's not actually inconsistent if you understand her ethics.
I just want to point out that Ned's daughter is really smart, and she's a deist.
Which means she could be a Freemason.
We all need imaginary friends.
So, yeah. Which proves they're not going to space. That's
Say it's the Satanist.
Yeah, I recognize the power of imaginary friends. They can help you do great things. And they convince lots of women to have sex with you.
I think I would have enjoyed it more if there was more of a representation of like this is, secular morality, from at least.
Oh my God!
But you'd have to.
Headless.
Okay. You'd have to combine it with some sort of philosophy of some sort, though. Like, it's
a philosophical
weird.
question.
Secularism is incomplete, and the word atheism is incomplete.
Is that Steve? Holy shit! It's
You can't get G-Man into a philosophical debate, though. That's not going to work out.
He can't understand polysyllabic words. Like, let alone sentences with more than 3 words in them. Stop it. Just stop trying to talk to him.
I think that was the downfall of this, like the evening's or the whole debate was that the 12-minute video. I was just like, G-Man is not paying attention. He's a goldfish. You're probably
he was playing a fucking video.
No, Mo. Goldfish could pay attention longer.
Mo,
you can train a goldfish.
Mo, you're gonna have to donate $20 to Super Track.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Gesture.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just like, you know what? I get paid tomorrow. I got $6. I'll limit myself to 3 $2 chats, and 2 of them are going to be devoted to how horrible of a non-moderator James is.
The other one was
hashtag free
claim that it was a mistake and revoke all those chats, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't any moderating in that.
Actually, yeah, Tyler's kind of got a point. The first one was good, though. The hashtag free Betty, I'm not going to take that one back.
No, that was pretty good. I didn't get to hear any of it. My headset died and I was out getting food. So the only part I got to hear was the Q&A, which was morning. But I asked a question and it didn't get to it. It was like the next one and they just stopped to let G-Man rattle on. I just asked him, if you know a rape is about to occur and you have the ability and the opportunity to prevent it, what is the moral thing to do?
It's planned.
It's a question I ask all theists.
Okay, so let's add to it. If you knew a rape was about to happen and you could stop it, but that person would conceive a child through rape, and let's say the mother decides to have the child, and that child cures cancer, would you still stop it?
Yeah.
So all your canceled patients are fucked.
Yeah. So
Because if I have the power to see the future, I have the power to cure cancer myself. I can see what cure cancer was going to be, and I'll just do
You
it.
don't have the power to see the future in this scenario.
Well, then
You
I would
just-
stop it. Yes.
You just know the consequences of it.
Wait,
Well-
you can't see the future, but you know the consequences.
You know that the consequence will be that that child would ultimately result in curing cancer. You don't know the means or the method that they would use.
That's seeing the
That's
future.
seeing the future, isn't it? That's seeing the
Let's say
future.
a
You're
grown
seeing the
up-
consequence of the future.
Because
You're not seeing all the
to be-
details of the future.
To maintain consistency in the scenario, I wouldn't be able to know those details at the time the rape was about to occur.
Well, then you wouldn't necessarily know about the rape either,
Like,
necessarily.
I can see rape happening. Like, you can look
Oh,
over and
well, you
see
better
a
go
dude's
stop
about to
it.
rape somebody,
Go stop
and I
it
can
right
run
now.
over there and stop it.
Why are you here when there's rape happening?
Oh, there's no rape happening near me, unless whatever that girl's doing upstairs with her dog is rape.
Poor dog.
Yeah, I don't know. It just keeps running back and forth across the apartment.
You know, there's these feminists that say farting is rape.
Oh, come on.
It
No.
depends who's doing the farts.
Fart rape. Yeah, that's what they
No.
do. Yeah, they actually do say this.
Crop
So I
dusting,
caught my
the
husband.
newest form of
fart.
rape.
I've read some stupid shit from like
Well, look,
pay to
it's
publish
coming.
stupid journals, but
Wait, what?
Like
No.
raping your nose? Farts rape your nose?
Wait, let me talk to my
No.
fart raper. Fart raper.
you, the fucker who Dutch ovened me. Get over here.
Time when you Dutch oven me and steamrolled me.
Deep.
Which time?
Oh God.
That was a Cleveland steamer. Not a steamroll.
Hold on, holy, I gotta follow
That's
up
not a
question.
Cleveland steamer. Bad Nick.
You got a follow up question for my husband? Okay. here you
No,
go.
not for him. For the actual raping, not the farting.
Oh, the actual raping. Well,
Yeah,
you're still
so,
here in Discord.
Now we're
What's
going to go
going
with
on?
the taking into account all the abilities of the deity you believe exists. What is the moral thing for it to do? If the moral thing for a human to do would be to stop the rape, unless the person was going to cure cancer, we'll count out all those possible rapes. Non-cancer curing rapes should be stopped.
Well,
What would
here's the actual problem that is actually you encounter with what G-Man proposes as the true deity is that he's basically the author of the story.
Yeah.
You don't hold George R.R. Martin morally responsible for what happens to his characters in his stories.
If
You may
he
not
made
like-
real people and caused
You-
those things to really happen,
well-
he would be responsible.
Well,
They're not real.
At that point, you could also argue that's just a separation of degree. Is
Yeah.
that when George R.R. Martin, kills off Arya Stark? Because guess what? I hate to break it to everybody,
Hey,
she's dead.
stop it.
But
Ire? Like, you mean Arya?
yeah, Arya's dead.
Oh,
Spoiler
you said
alert.
Ire. I was like,
By the
my
way,
life for
there's a
Ire.
rule against spoilers on this server.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's not been revealed yet in the TV series.
Oh my God.
I
Yeah,
don't
she's-
think it matters.
I don't even think it's been
supposed to
revealed
be
in the
like
books
there's
yet.
a theory. You're not supposed to be like for sure.
It is a theory that she's dead, considering the fact of like how the TV series
Stop
goes.
it. Just
Wait,
stop
didn't
it.
she die and like take somebody else's face?
No. One of the faceless people took her face.
One of the faces
Alright.
stabbed her. Then she looked like she was dead, but then she totally wasn't dead. And then she took the poison thing, and you're like, oh, for sure she's dead. And then she's not dead, and I don't know.
God, the series is like D&D Monster Manual raped Lord of the Rings.
Basically, yeah. But
But if God was him, then God would be a moral monster. Yes.
So the problem is
God will be a
when you
moral
pause-
monster, except that from his perspective, those individuals he's writing about don't actually morally matter. They're just there to make a good story.
Well, that's contrary to the theology, though, because he prescribes moral edicts.
Well, he can tell them what to do.
Like the goal here is to either get to the point where somebody says that God would know there's a greater good that's going to come from it, because with an omni-deity, there's no greater good that can come from it that it couldn't do without it. So that doesn't matter. And
Not really, no, because if there was an omni-deity, and if you're operating under the assumption that what is good is what is consistent with God, you couldn't actually have a situation where there could be anything greater than good that comes from it, because anything that would come from it would necessarily have to be good.
That's the second part of the goal. So the goal is either to show that the omni-deity is arbitrarily letting this person get raped to produce an effect that it could do anyway else, or to show that there's an inconsistency between saying that what is morally good is dependent on God's nature when it's different if you're God. Because if it's morally good for humans to do and it's dependent on God's nature, it should also be morally good for the God to do.
Yeah.
So you're showing a disconnect somewhere. But I never get an honest answer. It's always a one-off, well, God would never do that, or God knows that something else better is going to come from it.
I love that one. Like the just outright rejection of the hypothetical.
Yeah, it's great, because then you could just cite a Bible passage where he kills a baby or something. God would never tell me to kill a baby.
Well, then,
Abraham,
I mean, I do wrestle with this.
stab your kid.
This question, and when I've talked to other Christians and I bring up, say, David's baby dying, so David does a sin. David does a sin, and he says, "Hey, that lady bathing on the roof is pretty hot, even though she's married. Come on over." And so he gets her pregnant, and then goes, "Oh crap, I got her pregnant." And then he goes, "Oh, I'll get her to sleep with her husband." So he summons her husband, and says, husband goes, "Oh, I couldn't sleep with my wife because I'm a noble man, and all my men are there, and how could I?" And David goes, "Oh crap!" And so David decides to kill him by putting him in the front of the line, having the men fall back, and so that he dies.
Yeah.
So David murders a man, but get this: the child that Bathsheba has suffers and dies. An infant dies in like last 7 days and then dies. And they go, "Oh, it's because of the sins of the father." And it's very strange. It's a very strange story. And so when I bring that up to other theists, they go, "Oh, but but that but that baby went to heaven." Like,
Yeah.
well, that's an argument for an abortionist, isn't it?
Well, no, it's interesting because I actually remember talking to somebody, not for the similar situation in terms of it being an abortion story, but good point on that because I can see where they might find a derivative. But somebody actually appealed to that story because they actually learned about it from Leonard Cohen. And I thought that was interesting because I was just like, well, that is just a poetic alliteration of it. It's not actually the story as it happened, but that's how most people actually hear about that story.
Oh, well, Leonard Cohen always uses, I love Leonard Cohen. He uses a lot of biblical metaphors. My favorite one is the Abraham and Isaac song, which is really about old men sending young men to war,
Oh, yeah.
but it's, got the sacrificial imagery and everything.
But that's what I mean. I just don't. I think people are only familiar with the imagery of the story and not so much, the consequences or.
Plus, he cross images, and
Yeah,
the famous one, Hallelujah, is first a fairly kind of mournful, darkish song.
Oh,
I
most certainly.
I don't understand why it's in Shrek, and I don't know why people are singing it in memorial services because it doesn't belong there.
No.
song.
But that line
yeah.
where he says she ties you to the kitchen chair and cut your hair or whatever. That line is that's Samson and Delilah. So he uses metaphors, like cross metaphors.
So as she betrays you.
Well, also,
Yeah, so it's David and Bathsheba, then it flips to Samson and Delilah.
Yeah.
Also, one random guy in the Bible has magic hair.
that's a weird song for a funeral service because it does include a line where the guy's asking the person he's talking to if they remember that one time they had sex. So,
Oh yeah, then the Holy Spirit moved in you.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. And and it's only perpetuated by the fact that he also mentioned, and I was moving too.
I'm totally gonna use that
No,
line
I
next
know.
time.
It's not religious. It's not like a kiddie song. It does not belong with kids.
I think
Have
though.
you ever heard of Ring Around the Rosie?
Yeah,
It's about burning bodies from the plague.
All
No, but
right.
I think the iteration in Shrek was attributed to Jeff Buckley, who died I think about 3 or 4 years earlier. I
No,
think
that
that's
wasn't Buckley's version.
No, it wasn't Buckley's version, but I think the guy who one of the producers or the music supervisor in it knew him or something. That's what I heard. I don't know.
When that school shooting happened and all the celebrities sang Hallelujah, I was like, "What are you doing? Why are you singing
Yeah, it's
that?"
not that kind of. It's not
that
appropriate.
that is not appropriate.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, don't sing all those lines.
Yeah, I mean it's mostly famous for the Buckley version, but
Are we all just going to ignore how Lord Farquaad used quasi-religious terminology to demonize the fairy tale creatures and promoted genocide?
I'm kind of curious as to whether or not we're going to completely ignore everything else pertaining to the so-called debate.
Well, the
There was
so-called debate wasn't very.
There was no debate.
It was a dumpster fire. I
Well,
mean,
Hence
it was
the so-called debate.
it was
For,
pigeon
for
chess.
one, from my point of view, I really
Pigeon.
would have
Oh,
liked
that's
to
good.
see Ned present more of his worldview and less about like this is what's wrong with your worldview, because it's all like the same old arguments I've always
His
heard.
strategy failed because he goes up and not because he goes up against G-Man, but because he goes up against G-Man. So in other words, my point is when you go up against G-Man, you can't be clever because he's not smart enough to understand your sarcasm. He's not smart enough to understand your, simplicity. He just is
Or
just an
analogies.
asshole. Yeah, he's just a dick. I mean, just forget it.
Well, somebody
Why don't
made a
we? Why don't we
somebody
have
made
him
a
go
comment
first?
about him not understanding multisyllabic words. The man doesn't understand multisyllabic sentences.
No.
Doesn't listen to him.
Why don't we have Negation pull that argument on someone that's not a pre-supper and is pretty smart, like General Han
Well,
Solo?
in that sense, like, oh, G-Man doesn't understand multisyllabic words. G-Man doesn't actually matter in this. Because this is Ned's time to shine. This is Ned's point at which he can basically present his view and why it is he thinks that all other views fail. In particular, why it is that he thinks that G-Man's particular creationist view fails.
But he didn't. He went
And
with
he
a different
didn't. And that's a fault against Ned.
Well, Nicola, actually, you and I are even talked like right as the debate was beginning. The title of the
What we
debate
did, and then I
actually-
fucked
yeah.
off because he mentioned the Big Bang, and I went, "No, bucket, no, I'm gone."
Yeah, well, no, yeah. Well, the title of the debate was like neither one of them claims to have a premise, or what did we say? I can't remember.
Well,
Like
we were led to believe that
the basis of morality versus secular versus Christian. You know, I
yeah,
can't
and
remember exactly.
the idea was that the substance of the topic would be that it is impossible in principle for someone who isn't a Christian to justify their moral framework. That was what we were led to believe. And we saw the topic, and everyone's heart sank.
Well, when he started playing the video, that's when I was just like, you're gonna lose people. Not to mention the guy who you shouldn't be losing, but you lost before you even started.
It's too broad of a topic in the first place. They needed
was.
to narrow it down into some particular.
That's
well,
what
like-
we were expecting, is that
Yeah.
any debate topic should be narrowed down to some kind of either or scenario.
Yeah, I'm not even being sarcastic here. I honestly think a
No,
debate,
not even either or. It should be a question that you can take an affirmative position on, and the other side takes a negative position on.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hence
it was,
either or.
It was a non-starter right off the bat.
No, because it's either or if you mean true or false. But
no, either or as in your position or my position.
No, well, so that that implies that both sides have a positive position.
It could.
I think
they shouldn't.
Yeah, I think
It
Christopher, what
shouldn't.
you're
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah, what you're
It
saying
should be a
is
positive position and a negative position.
it should be a binary argument, correct?
So I think it was Tyler that first pointed out, I think, that secular morality is kind of a vague term, wouldn't you agree? Like secular morality, well, what does that mean?
It's entirely vacuous.
It doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Right. So secular morality just means
I'll
not
take credit for it.
not completely
No, it just means
affiliated to a religion.
no. It just means at the bare most, like basic level, secular morality just means is compatible with religion and irreligion. That's
I
it.
mean-
It's
Right.
entirely neutral.
Like a good
Why
debate
is
topic.
Negation of P hanging out in the games channel right now?
Oh, I don't know, but let me move them.
He is down there.
I'm just waiting for somebody to use mirror neurons as the basis for their morality, because that seems like an interesting one. Nobody's going to know what the fuck they're talking about, and it's actually biologically viable.
It's even more fun when I talk to CCP because it's like, oh, you don't have a foundation for your morality, and I go, yeah, I'm a non-cognitivist.
They don't even know what that means.
Yeah,
Philosophical
exactly.
question. Way that G-Man's going to understand any philosophy.
Hey guys, am I in?
Yeah.
You did
Were you
it.
not able to get in?
You did
shit. Finally. I mean, shit. I've been trying to do it for like 5 minutes. It wouldn't give me the live stream link. It
You just gotta start adding
everybody.
everybody so we can drag you around. Unless you're refreshing it constantly, it might bug out.
Yeah, I don't know. So, I kind of heard a little bit of the conversation, and basically, I don't know. I mean, the biggest thing that I am surprised to hear is it sounded like that my argument's too convoluted and nobody actually comprehended it. Is that fair?
No.
No, it's we comprehended the point in the avenue in which you were attacking it. The problem is that you didn't actually make an argument for the point that you were supposed to be defending.
Well, see, and I tried to do that like 2 or 3 times, but G-Man wouldn't shut the hell up defending his God. I wanted to get into, in the beginning, and that's why I prefaced it with saying, look, I'm going to be going to, honestly, I wanted to, and I've got pages of notes in what I wanted to say to defend a secular-based moral system founded in evolution. But again, it seemed that G-Man wanted no part of that. All he wanted to do was misrepresent what the argument against was.
Well, that doesn't actually matter. Is that in your opening statement, what you should have done is just presented a defense or a justification for how it is that you could have a moral system that doesn't necessarily require a Christian God and just left it at that, as opposed to going on the offensive and attacking G-Man's particular conception of God.
Well, but I think that, honestly, I looked at it as a 2-pronged approach. Number one, again, the setup was we've got 2 stools. Both of them are claiming morality. Both of them have the same foundations that they need in order to maintain that structural integrity of the stool. And if one of the stools can maintain those 3 foundations, the other one even loses one of the legs, then the one that's left standing is the superior, principle that we could use.
Well,
so
just consider this, Ned. That if you eviscerate G-Man's moral views, have you refuted every single Christian ethic?
And again, the point was twofold.
Well,
I think
yes or
that
no.
I spoke and I would have to say G-Man's flavor of Christianity, if I can encompass the vast majority, if not what I would consider to be all of Christians' foundational views of God, and those foundations in and of themselves erode morality to the point where it's unattainable, then yeah, it would negate the vast majority, if not all, Christian worldviews. So yeah, I believe that that argument can get there. And if not, tell me why. I mean, I honestly want to know.
Particularly because that wasn't the topic.
No. The topic was which provides a better foundation for morality. And if I could show,
or a secular worldview.
Right, either a secular worldview or Christianity.
Not G-Man.
No, but G-Man is the token Christian at this point. I could care less who my...
It doesn't matter if he's a token Christian. You're arguing against Christianity. You're not arguing against G-Man.
He can argue against the flavor of Christianity he's arguing with, because
you could, yeah, but if you're arguing in favor of secularism, you would have to at least what is anticipated.
And I tried.
Is present a defense as to why it is that a religiously neutral moral framework would be better suited than one that is particular to one religion. And there's an easy way to go about doing that.
And I thought I did that by saying, one, if nothing else, it can exist. The moral goods and bads are identifiable, and the actions you take based on that identification are justifiable. Whereas with Christianity, none of those are possible.
There you lost me.
But you run afoul of certain fringe interpretations of Christianity that get around that. Let me use an analogy to show you what the issue is here. Like, I can explain why great value toilet paper sucks. Chafe your ass. It doesn't wipe cleanly. It's single ply. But that doesn't tell you if Dollar General toilet paper is good or better.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that if an argument is not all encompassing and it doesn't account for any and all idiosyncrasies of a certain outlier, it's not valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing, because like saying that you have to cater to all flavors of Christianity is like saying to me in a debate, I have to take in nihilism, and I have to take in humanism, and I have to take in anti-realism and realism, and like all these weird stances.
Exactly.
But no, you can get around that. Like, you have to show a deficit and where yours makes up for it, and it has to be a general enough deficit that it covers most of the things.
And I did that. I thought, tell me where in any of the deficits that I identified are not general enough to encompass the vast majority of Christianity, and how my worldview does not account or give a better account for those. Because that's exactly what I was trying to do.
I only was able to actually start listening again at the Q&A, so I don't know what case you made. That was just the point they were trying to convey is what I was trying to help clear up.
Okay, well,
or at least the point I think Nicola was trying to convey. But
I guess that's the question, is that, I mean, in a nutshell, what I'm arguing is with an omni God that is all good, and what's funny is if it's all bad, it works exactly the same way. But in this case, because Christianity claims an all benevolent, all good being that is all powerful with a plan, that would mean every action that takes place in that reality that God interacts with has to be good. If he wants good to happen, which an omni being that is all good has to, it cannot work against its nature and want bad things to happen, then that completely sets the table or pushes everything onto the good side of the scale. No matter how bad, how atrocious something may look from a human perspective, it has to be good.
I agree with you. The problem is G-Man is not smart enough to understand what you're saying.
Okay, and again, I don't care about G-Man. He asked me, and I agreed just because I was bored. I didn't go searching for him. He's been bugging me for about 2 months to do this, and I'm like, fine. You go into a channel that I think is a decent channel, I'll go with you. And we found Debate for You, and I'm like, fine, we'll do this. But again, I want the argument out there. And honestly, if G-Man gets it, great. If he doesn't, I could give a shit. I don't care. So that's the first leg that destroys even morality to be able to coexist with an omni God. It's nonsensical to even posit any type of morality. So it can't exist. Now, let's say somehow that a Christian can get by that. I don't know how, but let's say they do. Well, the
only
next thing
an
is
omni benevolent God, though. It could be all the other omnis and just make up benevolence and evil to amuse itself.
Okay, but again, I mean, from what I understand, and I think if you approach every Christian or 99% of the Christians, saying that their God is not omnibenevolent is sacrilegious. It goes against.
I don't know
It
about that.
depends on how you define omnibenevolent, right?
It depends on the denomination you're talking about, too. I don't think the Catholics think their deity's omnibenevolent. It likes to
even
murder
liberal
people.
Christians often run away from the phrase too, because instead of it meaning, people take it to mean all loving, and when they take it as all loving, they mean without the ability to do something that would seem to hurt.
No, and you're right. And I don't use it in that context. I use it as all good. And in the same way that there needs to be in a naturalistic worldview, there are certain pains that have to be endured if you want to attain a goal. If I want to get stronger, I have to lift weights, which is painful and potentially harmful. I could hurt myself doing it, but I'm going to get stronger, at least in theory. But I have to suffer that pain in order to get there. So
then I would say yes, you're right. That most of Christianity would believe that God is benevolent. Yeah. So
right. So
yeah.
So on that end of it, that pushes everything to the good side. Well, there's no bad. There's no evil. So morality is non-existent. You can't have a moral system that is only all good or only all bad. It makes no sense. So that's the first leg. The second leg is even if you could, because of God's plan and God's will and our inability to foresee what the outcome of these quote unquote atrocious acts are going to bring about, we as limited beings, we with only sight, only limited vision, may try and stop it. Now, again, it's not about being able to stop it. It's the attempt to stop it and believe that these are quote unquote evil actions. We are misidentifying these actions and categorizing them in a way that is not correct. So there again, we cannot identify good and evil. So there's the second leg. And then the third leg is justifiability. So even if you could have Christianity and an omni-God with morality, and you could identify good and evil, any action you take cannot be justified, because the only actions that are ever justified in the Bible, the only way that any justification is ever given is because God said so. God told me to do this. God directed this to happen, or God did it himself. Therefore, it's good. Well, if that's your reasoning, if that's your justification, that's a fallacy. That's argument from authority 101. The authoritarian told me to do this. I did it. Therefore, it's right. No, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Divine command theory.
Exactly. Divine command theory is absolutely, is absolutely 100%. Right. So the third leg therefore evaporates.
There's no way he's natural law. He doesn't sound like a natural law. So I think it would be safe to say that G-Man and Beckel are divine command theorists. So when you argue with them, you can definitely head that direction.
Right. And I mean, he said as much, but he didn't like to admit it. He didn't like to. And when I pointed out multiple times, G-Man, you're arguing for me. This is argument from authority, what you're saying. No. Well, again, he doesn't understand it. I don't care. I just want the audience to understand. Yes, he is.
The problem with divine command theory, from what I can see, is it says, well, God says that this is good when God does it. So killing is good when God does it because God. And there's like this circular thing. And then you're like, well, how could killing doesn't seem really nice to me? How can that be good? And they go, but God's very nature is good. And you go, oh,
absolutely.
Okay. So morality is rooted in God's very nature, and his very nature is good, and you can't do anything that's opposite of his nature. So,
right.
Okay. So now you're stuck with, and then whatever God says is good because God. And
that's not G-Man's workaround, though. His workaround's a bit different. His workaround is that unlawful killing is what is bad, and if God kills, it's always lawful because God is the lawmaker. So it's
Yeah,
like if a
but
police or if a judge kills you or a legislator kills you, I don't know,
it's
depending on what
still his
level.
workaround though, because the difference is he says the law applies to you, but not the writer of the law.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just one step removed. It's still argument from authority or divine command theory, in that the law is now what is the ultimate authority there. There's no reason, there's no testability if that law is correct. It's just
And
the
the
law says this, therefore you do it.
and
Oh
the
yeah, no, I
phrasing
agree
is
with that.
actually amazing because when you say the law, then you go, well, then let me hold God accountable to this law, and then you're like, well, how are you going to create this powerful deity, or not create? How are you going to hold accountable this powerful deity to your puny laws? That's silly. That's like a 3-year-old saying, okay, parent, I'm going to hold you to this rule. You need to go to bed at 7 o'clock at night because it's the law.
Right. And then, I mean, so if I take away all three of those legs, and again, all I needed to do to be successful is kick out one of them. Now, I argue, at least in my opinion, I've negated all three. So then when we flip it and we go and look at what does evolution provide, well, from square one, if we look at how morality is viewed from an evolutionary standpoint, we have not only our species, but we have dolphins. We have, I mean, we can go through in most of the great apes and, I mean, all of the quote unquote higher order thinking mammals, at least, especially ones that are working groups that are herd mentality, we see the same type of morality. And that would lead us to think that, look, this is an emergent property of a couple of things. One, you need to be an organism that benefits from collective behavior, being a herd. Secondarily, you have to be intelligent enough to understand that when I obtain something, it benefits not only myself, but the collective if I allow the collective to use it. I don't hoard it. I'm not selfish with it. And that goes everything from food all the way down to protecting others in the herd, sacrificing one's own even life. If you look at what, many of the herd animals do. So once you get to that point and you get to an ultra social animal like us, now not only do we get into the point where you can understand where empathy may come from, but you understand why sharing would be important, where collective behaviors such as I'm going to hold you on my shoulders to get the fruit, because now we can get more fruit, as long as, and this is where the next level of order of thinking comes in, is fairness. As long as when you get the fruit, you give me my portion, it works. We can do that. And it makes, in my opinion anyway, perfect sense that this would emerge from apes that are not only foragers, but hunters that, depending on the situation, don't have enough to sustain themselves. And I guess the main difference between us and the great apes, and like I said in the book that I was going to cite, specifically goes into this, that the main difference is if you look at the great apes, for the most part, when they go out to eat or forage, they go out on their own. They almost never go out in a pack. They never share within each other that much. They will go out and forage, and then they'll all come back together, and they may do a group behavior, but for the most part, foraging is on their own. Humanity has made that next step, where foraging has now become the collective behavior. That, by necessity, is going to breed fairness and a very rudimentary, but at least a genesis for ethics and morality in general. And if we allow that to expand over 100,000 years and get into tribes, get into cities, get into nations, all of that collective behavior is going to reinforce itself to the point of where we now empathize, and at least some of us try to work to better mankind, not only in our local group, but on a on a planet-wide basis, because we understand that it's going to help us as a species. Now, is that objective? Absolutely not. It is subjective to us as a species. And that's just the nature of it. But if we have a collective goal, namely survival, then it makes sense that our goals would align. And how we think we can best survive is going to be looked at in a myriad of different ways. Therefore, we have a whole bunch of different, for lack of a better term, social experiments going on that range everything from dictatorships all the way down to completely altruistic, open societies that do absolutely nothing but, work as a collective, literally, and give everything away to each other. Now, which ones work best? We're still finding out.
That's sciencey talk. He's not going to go there. He didn't come from no monkey.
But again, just because he doesn't understand it doesn't mean that it's not right. And he doesn't want me to use big words. Where exactly did I throw in one college level word there? I don't think I did.
Your mistake there was college level.
But that's his problem. He doesn't, he wants you to use 5-year-old speech, which I think for the most part I do, because I want people to understand my points.
Anything that is not monosyllabic, he won't understand.
And again,
unfortunately, it didn't get to the second part of the argument.
And again, for the most part, I'm not speaking to him. I'm using the platform to get the idea out there. And I'm hoping that someone that does understand, that can speak at a 12th grade or better level, will pick it up and say, hey man, you're wrong here. Let me show you why. Let's go. Please do. Because that's what the whole point of me debating. I don't care about winning. I don't care about embarrassing him. Yeah, granted, he pisses me off when he sits there and comes back and says, oh, you're saying God is evil. And where in the hell are you getting that? I have gone so much out of my way to safeguard and to try to make sure that everything in that video and everything that I've said is the absolute opposite of that. And everything God does is not only good, but the ultimate of good. For you to freaking pull that crap, yeah, I got heated because I got sick of being basically lied about.
Well, just speaking on that specifically, Ned, I did take a couple notes. And one of the things that G-Man did bring up was the notion that God created evil.
Okay.
And that particular passage that G-Man was referring to, I think appropriately, or the standard apologetic at least, is that it's not moral evil. It's natural calamity.
Okay. And so I'll ask you the same
point, like the thing that, like, yes, you didn't respond to it well, but well, you did, but there is a natural counter apologetic to it, which is the evidential problem of evil.
Okay. Which, again, I'll ask you the same thing I asked him off air. Could God, being an omni being, not use evil in the way that you're the way that you're portraying it, or the way that the Bible is, whatever, not only natural calamity, but honestly evil individuals, to do his good, to work through them to attain good? Did I lose you guys?
If
Yeah,
you're talking
my
about
answer would be I don't know.
if you're talking about natural calamity, that's kind of the whole point of the problem.
No. I'm going the opposite direction. I'm talking about wicked individuals. I mean,
Wicked
Proverbs 6. Yeah, I mean, Proverbs 16:4 is what I went to when he didn't like the first one.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem, is that in reference to that particular verse that he had initially brought up, he's not talking about wicked individuals, and you always have to be very cautious about using the Proverbs.
Okay, but again, I don't care. I mean, I've got at least 6 passages from Old and New Testament, ranging literally from Genesis at least through Romans, where God specifically is saying, I use evil and wicked, the wicked, which I'm assuming would be people, to do his bidding.
So an example of God using wicked people to do his bidding. So it would be the Persians coming down and getting control over Israel. And every time
Absolutely.
Israel sins, the Persians come down. It would
Yeah.
be Pharaoh. Pharaoh
Absolutely.
Pharaoh is actually
Pharaoh
used,
in Exodus.
even though his wrath was displayed on him. The
Right.
other
And
one
then
would
and then
be Judas. Judas was used by God. Judas is the grand patsy, right?
Yep, and I spoke to that at the end. I mean, and even if you want to go Pontius Pilate or whoever, but the point, and then to take a step back and say, who created those individuals? Was it not God? And was it not known to God what they would do, as it says in the Bible, before they are in the womb? He knows what their role will be. He is creating them specifically for his plan. He is creating them wicked to bring about salvation, at least in Pontius Pilate and Judas's case.
Well, that actually brings me up to the next 2 points in the notes that I took from your debate, which is that, as G-Man did keep referencing, and this is a slight against G-Man as well, because he thinks Calvinism is false, but he kept referring back to, you have to ask a Calvinist.
Okay.
Calvinists have this idea that God has a fractured will, that God's faculties are divided between what it is he desires and what his motives actually are. And as a result of that, you have to discern what it is would be the moral will. And the moral will would be the motive, not the desires. But the second point is that if you're talking about an omni-being, and this is actually a point that you missed, is that it's the old Sartre and John Calvin distinction, which is that if you're dealing with the classical omni-being, being that is omniscient and omnipotent, either humanity is free or God isn't. And if God isn't free, but he's still omnipotent in that he has ultimate dominion and control over all of creation, and he knows what will happen, but he can't change any of it, then he is basically an automaton to whatever the judgment would happen to be.
I agree, and I also would agree that he's not all powerful at that point.
He's not all powerful in a more like pre-theoretical sense of it.
Right. And if that is the God that you are prescribing to, this argument absolutely will not work. And again, I'm not prescribing this as the be all and end all for Christianity globally and universally. But I do think that from a, I guess, average for, most Christians, these questions are going to be very problematic because I don't think most of them are going to take that view.
Not really. I think actually most of them would take similar views.
That God is constrained?
God constrains himself at the very least.
Okay,
most Christians, in my experience, take a combination of the two views in that God does have this fractured will that the Calvinists would say that he has. He has the divine will, and he has the judgmental will, and he has his intentional will. And those can be in conflict with one another, but that doesn't.
So explain. Explain that to me, because again, I'm not understanding how an all-powerful being can have a desire that would not be instantaneously fulfilled.
Well, there's a good example is that will as desire, but you could also have will as particular faculty of respecting a conception of law.
Okay, but
devoid of desire, devoid of anything idiosyncratic. Just pure motive.
But again, he's
I've always long viewed God as self-limiting for whatever reason. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I think that's the only way it could make sense is if God was deliberately self-limiting for I don't know why.
But again, if
When it
he's
comes to
self-limiting, then well, wait a second. If he's self-limiting, then he is still successful in his desire. He has to want to self-limit. Therefore,
Sure,
he has
in his desire.
right.
But
Which means wait a second. Wait a second. He also has to understand that the ramifications, what the ramifications of that self-limitation will be, and he must want those that to come forth. If he didn't, he wouldn't self-limit, and he would change it.
No. Well, hey Jay.
Sorry. I was going to add.
You have the stream on.
Yeah. Let me just say this, Jay. Let me say this, Ned. Is that I think you're fixated on will as being desire, and the issue there is that there are multiple different conceptions of will, and you can fracture an individual's will, and you can also prioritize the will of an individual after you fractured it in that way.
Only in a limited being, not in an omni being.
Why not in an omni being?
Because an omni being would have to, number one, understand everything that is going to come to fruition based on any limitation he sets within himself.
Sure.
And therefore desire that outcome. Because if he didn't want...
Well, there we go back again, is that you go directly to desire. Like, we could have God desiring... We could have God of the Bible desiring outcome X, but his motives are indifferent to that. That his motives could be entirely, human directed.
Let's start backwards.
There's no contradiction there, though.
Okay, and again, I want to get there. If he has a desire, is that desire going to come to fruition?
Sure.
Okay. So the means are secondary. Doesn't matter. There may be a million different ways to get to that desired outcome.
We haven't brought up means.
But effectively you had when you started talking about humans.
No,
what I'm saying is...
I talked about motives.
Okay, motives. If there's 3 different motives that can get you to the same outcome, would it matter which one that you're using? And let's say, relatively speaking, all of them give the same amount of pain and suffering and all that, just to make it an easy, more of an easy cut and paste, which it's not ever going to be that, I understand. But to simplify this, the motives are not in question. It's the desired outcome that matters here.
If the desired outcome is the ultimate salvation of all humanity.
Right.
And the motives for that is God believes himself responsible for his creation.
Right.
I would think that the motives matter more than the outcome.
Okay.
If it were just that God wanted the salvation of man just for the sake of glorifying himself, and it wasn't out of any sense of duty or anything like that.
That's a second order desire. That's not a primary desire.
It is actually the primary desire for action.
Well, he wanted to save mankind before he created mankind. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He'd have to want them to be fallen before they'd have to want to save them.
Yeah, that generally, that's often the thought. So it's foreknowledge, knowing that there would be a rebellion and Lucifer would fall and do the temptation thing, and that they would be able to choose between the knowledge and good and evil or the tree of life. And
Well, but even before that, he had to want a reality in which a Lucifer could exist and fall.
Yeah.
Well,
and not only that, but
there's an added problem there if you add that into it.
So let's go back one step. let's go back one step. So we've got the desired outcome being salvation of mankind and God's glory. In other words, the best of all possible plans coming to fruition. And the desire comes from him wanting to, I guess, stay true to mankind. And because of his obligation that he feels to mankind, it has to be done in this way. Well, with an omni being, if he, and maybe this is where there may be some pushback, because I honestly think this is an interesting kind of avenue to explore. Would it not be the case that an omni being would optimize, perhaps even must optimize, the path to his desired outcome?
The problem
Talking,
is that
you're talking about
there
a
could
perfect
be-
being, not an omni being.
There could be multiple
let's-
different paths. Well,
That
to be
that's
fair,
that's the
for the
next
sake
question.
of this conversation, we're talking about, like, in classical theism, an omni being is a perfect being.
Yeah, and that's my entire point. Is that if
No,
there
like,
are
I'm
multiple,
totally on board with that. Like if you want my actual opinion on a perfect being, the classical god of theism, I think it's logically impossible.
okay, and so do I.
So-
But again, I'm going to grant that to demonstrate that it is problematic. So,
I'm sorry there, Ned, but if you grant that it's logically impossible, the conversation is kind
no,
of
not that I grant. No. I do the opposite. I say that even though I find it problematic, I'm going to overlook those, I guess, self-contradictory attributes, and grant that being a limited being, I may not be able to comprehend something as is awe-inspiring as a perfect being. It may, in fact, be attainable. I'll grant that that's the case. But if that's the case, then what that effectively does is that constrains that being into being perfect, which means if there are multiple avenues to attain whatever his desire is, he is constrained to the best avenue. He can't take a lesser avenue, even if it gets him to the same place. He would still have to take the optimal avenue. Which,
So-
again, go ahead.
If I put my Christian hat on there,
Yep.
I would say that the mistake you're making is that you're treating words like good, best, better, perfect as predicative terms as opposed to attributive terms.
Why couldn't they be both?
Would it be a predicative term for me to say that a flying fox is an enormous bat? Or would it be a predicative term for me to say that a flying fox is a brown bat?
Again, I could see both of them as being defensible.
They are defensible in their own rights. But the problem is that the former is an attributive term,
Right?
not a predicative one.
Why is it purely predicative?
The former? The former is
Yeah.
attributive.
Or attributive, sorry.
The former is attributive because enormous isn't actually a quality that is possessed by any particular individual. It's an entirely relativistic notion. Like, you
Again,
could have
and-
a flying fox that, guess what? Yes, it is enormous,
Right.
but it's still smaller than my car.
But again, just because it's subjective does not mean that it cannot be used.
That's not subjective.
It's not subjective in the sense of being mind dependent, but subjective. What I'm talking about is relativistic subjectiveness relative to something else. So the subjectiveness comes from case dependency. It still works. If we look at what we would consider a normative bat, what the size of a normal bat is, a fox in relation to that is enormous. Could be considered an objective statement.
True. Yeah.
Okay, so no longer
And so, well, let me run with this. Bearing that idea in mind, why is it not then we could relativize goodness in terms of God? That God is just better than us.
Because there's no relative scale there. It is optimal. The good that God is optimal. It is the best of all goods.
But there's also no existential scale of bigness or enormousness for the bat. And there is
well, wait a second.
There doesn't seem to be any for goodness.
But there is because you have assigned it by using a bat as your baseline.
Well, all I said was that flying fox is enormous.
No, you said could
that's
wait.
All I said.
You said
the flying fox is an enormous bat.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what you said.
The flying fox is an enormous bat. Okay.
Right.
The God of the Bible is a great being.
Okay. Compared to all other beings, he's a shit being.
Well, how is that any different? How is that any less attributive?
You gave the referent of all other beings to compare it to.
Exactly.
All of their actual beings, and no different than like in relation to the fox and all other bats.
But again, you assigned a baseline, and when
any being that hasn't genocided people, that's a better being.
Well, again, we won't get into that. I'm saying that if you're going to assign a baseline, then yes, it can be both.
Yeah,
I think there's a question that's glossed over way back then.
I'm sorry. I think that having 3 atheist arguments is just going to get convoluted.
I just had a question.
The thing that initially went through my mind when Tyler mentioned up the genocide is that, like, do you honestly think? No, like, do you honestly think that most Christians think that those genocides happened? Because I'm not a Christian. I'm an atheist.
Most Christian. If you could narrow it down to a denomination, I could give you a denominational.
Yeah, and therein lies the problem.
I don't know which denomination has the largest crazy population.
I'll answer it for you.
Independent Baptist.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of people who meet the Nicene Creed's sort of definition of Christian do not believe that the genocides that are referenced in the Old Testament actually occurred.
Regardless of the genocide, I have a question that that I wanted to ask like 20 minutes ago, and I thought I was unmuted when I asked it. Which overrides which? Does will override desire, or does desire override will?
There's a problem there in that. Like, the way that I view the will is that I don't really see a distinction between an individual's desires, their goals, and the reasons and the means that they could accomplish them.
Well, let's frame it this way.
Some other faculty that Kant does. Kant invents a whole new faculty for it.
But we've already got detritus in there. I'm talking about God floating around in whatever he's floating around in, alone, no universe. He decides what will is and what desire is, right? So whatever it wants, whatever this God with nothing else around wants, that's what I think should be talked. Because whatever it wants, if it is omnipotent and omniscient, will come to pass.
It wants to write the book Supernatural.
Ugh.
Well, and again, that is the first leg. Is if it's going to come to pass, and if it's omni, it has one and only path to get that greatest of good accomplished, which means anything that comes from that plan, from that path, you have to classify as a good action, especially if you look at it from a universal perspective in what could have occurred if any of those actions didn't take place. It has to be good, no matter how much we don't like it.
Have you guys ever seen the web series Mr. Deity?
Oh yeah, I like that a lot.
He shuts off his omniscience, right? But shutting off his omniscience and becoming non-omniscient was what he wanted, so it happened exactly as he wanted it, right? So even if this God wants to fractionate its will and become schizophrenic or whatever the fuck it's doing, whatever happens is exactly as it wanted it to happen, regardless of the mechanism it chose. And whatever that
Right.
mechanism is, if it is the definitional standard of goodness, is good.
But the one thing that most people stop there, and they don't realize that the God must have known by taking his omniscience away, or stopping his omniscience, he knew what would happen, what would occur after that, and wanted that to happen as well. Because if he could foresee that taking away his omniscience would have resulted in something that he did not desire, he wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
So
I
it
think
still plays into it.
I think in the series, Mr. Deity is bound by God time, so he can't say beyond that, and it continues forward from the point where he turns it off. I don't know. It's vague, but yeah, it's
And yeah, again,
not my fault.
if that's
any sense.
right, and again, if you want to constrain God, then this argument's not going to work. But
Yeah, no,
I don't
think
I
makes sense. So.
I don't think there's many Christians out there that will allow you to constrain God. They're going to say that yes, he is.
No, they'll do it
acting the way.
themselves.
Well, they will, like G-Man did, and not realize they're doing it. That's what's amazing to me.
I love when they say he can do things all things logically possible, because this entity is supposedly what decided what is and isn't logically possible in the first place.
Oh, that doesn't matter, because that in turn incurs its own problems.
Yeah, that's why I do think you should talk to is he calling himself General Han Solo still? Because if you talk to him long enough, he'll remove the need for God from whatever you're talking about. It's great.
Well, I mean, again, I put this out there just because I've been screwing around with it for about 2 years off and on, just kind of tweaking it and playing with it and whatever. And, like I said at the beginning of the debate, this semester has been nuts. So I haven't had any chance to do anything for about a year, maybe 2, especially this semester. But I'm hoping that by the summer it calms down again. And if I throw this out there now, maybe somebody like, General Han Solo, or, I mean, I had a brief conversation on Stephen McRae's channel with, Sci-10, and we got through the first leg, and all he said was, okay, that makes sense, but, I can still make decisions. And I said, okay, that's the second leg, and no, you can't. And we ran out of time, and, but again, I would like to have somebody, and I'm not saying that Psy is all that intelligent, but he's damn sure a sight better than G-Man, but someone who could actually follow along, think through this, and show me where the problems lie. Because
the difficulty is going to be finding an honest actor, I
Oh,
think.
I absolutely agree. I've been doing this for shit. I mean, I'm old guard. I've been doing this since 2006 was the first channel I put together. So I have yet to find many honest actors out there. Now there's a couple out there.
Well, I've still been trying to find somebody who could, if like from a cognitivist, or I don't know the exact correct terminology, somebody that could show me how to check the truth or falseness of a moral proposition. That's all I want. I think that's where you need to start.
That would be a wonderful, and again, that's what I'm saying is at the end of this, the justification is because God said it is, because it reflects God's nature. Well, how have you tested it?
I think that's a step 2. Like step 1 would be showing that a moral statement could have truth or falsehood. It could be true or false.
Oh, I'm the same way. I definitely am a subjectivist when it comes to morality. I do not believe in oughts. I do not believe in objective moral truths for sure.
Oh, I believe oughts exist. They're just not like, I don't know how to explain. They're goal-oriented statements.
Exactly, and
even the moral oughts, so-called.
Yeah, I mean, I drive Sokka nuts with this because he asked me one time, are you a realist or anti-realist? And I'm like, well, in some areas I'm a realist. And he's like, what? You always argue against, whatever. And I'm like, but there are real oughts. There are real things out there that, are wrong, but they are conditional. They're based on goals. They're based on what's going on at that particular moment. And now you can assign absolute oughts. Yes, we ought do this, conditional to our goals and conditional to what's going on. But if we change the goals, then we have a different ought.
Right, and the goals
So-
are
Well,
is statements, so it kind of fulfills that. But then people argue
Right.
they're not moral is statements.
Right, but that if you say that it's contingent on some framework, then the morals are not real.
Why not real?
That's not my
I mean,
fault.
Well,
And-
it's in the same way that numbers aren't real.
Okay. I mean, I'll definitely give you that.
Like it doesn't exist anywhere.
Right.
Right? Like there's intrinsic factor of the universe that
Oh yeah.
that something
absolutely.
is morally wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So
I agree.
so it's not real that they're wrong.
No,
It's
it's
contingent
the
on the
same way-
framework.
Like again, if you say, okay, what is 1 + 1? Well, if we're using a base 10, it's 2.
Right.
If
So-
we're using
so that's-
binary, it's so again, it's all about the framework and how
Yeah.
you set it up.
So unless I've completely forgotten the way things are defined, that would be an anti-realist position.
See, even though I do believe that given those goals and conditions, there are absolute oughts. I mean, I almost look at it like this. Is 1 + 1 2? Is that an absolute, pure, and concrete fact? In a base 10 system, I would say yes, it is objective. But it's only objective in that framework, in that system. So if we have a moral condition that is also constrained by the system, i.e. the goals, I think we can still have an absolute objective right and wrong there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense, but definitions correctly, that's not a realist position. That's a position because you're effectively saying that these conditions do not really exist. That's right. Somebody with
And again,
more
and that's
philosophy
where I'm kind of
education would be better.
right, and that's where I'm kind of fuzzy here because in a realist position, the way that I understand realism is that there are absolutes, that they are objectively true, period. And I guess
well, it's objectively true irrespective of any framework or anything else.
I thought it was mind independent. I thought that's what mattered. It didn't matter framework wise, it mattered mind.
Well, this being mind.
You broke up there. I couldn't hear you. Is anybody else breaking up, or is it just me?
He's breaking up for me too. I'm gonna reset the server region real quick. There'll be like 10 seconds of silence at the most.
Okay.
All right, everybody should be good.
I'm back.
Oh, it might be on CRISPR's end. You might have to refresh. I think the problem that I've seen is that people that want to
Is that
argue.
any better?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
like
that was my fault. I had something. I forgot that I had a no limit on. So it was taking that seriously.
Gotcha.
So anyway, yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I was just going to reiterate that. You know, I thought it was mind independent is what would throw something into subjectivity versus objective
right
truth, if you will.
I remember what I was going to say. Right. So when you talk about something as being real, it does need to be mind independent. But the thing is, you can't have something that takes into consideration any kind of let's use numbers here, right?
Right.
Numbers are never mind independent. So in other words,
interesting.
You can say that you have 3 sheep over there on the hill, but you don't have 3.
Right. Three is the
codification.
concept.
Yeah, 3 is always dependent on minds. Numbers are always dependent on minds. Ethics and morals are always dependent on minds. And so as soon as you say that, well, within some particular framework or conception or whatever else, that this thing is always morally wrong, that could be true. But because the framework is dependent on the existence of minds to conceptualize it, that framework and therefore that moral system must be mind dependent and therefore is not real.
Yeah, I think that
okay.
the disconnect
that's really good, CRISPR. Yeah, thank you, man. I mean that definitely I see where you can get. I mean, I don't see how you can defend realism at this point, but that definitely cleared things up. Thanks. That's good.
Well, I mean, this is only for like, I'm not saying that all forms of realism are indefensible, but moral realism is, right?
Yeah,
like, so
that's
again,
what I'm saying.
I've got a cup in front of me here, right? Like it's really there. That is a real thing. But morals must be mind dependent.
Is this a hologram?
Well, and again, if we get into solipsism, we definitely can start playing with that. But
holographic universe, is that cup real?
So I'm saying that that is a defensible position. I'm not saying that it's necessarily true. But like moral realism, I think it necessarily devolves into some kind of Platonic thought, and that's always wrong. So
yeah, that's good, man. I definitely. Yeah, you changed me there because I was on the fence trying to figure out. Yeah, and again, but cool. So I mean, that just puts me in anti-realism, and I'm fine with that because I think I've been there the whole time, just not clear enough to be able to articulate it in a way that makes sense. So,
right now, do the ethical pronouncements map to actual positions?
Actual positions or actual propositions?
That's the one.
Propositions? Yeah. No. I don't know of any way to demonstrate the truth value of a ethical or moral proposition.
So I think that it can be reduced into propositions in the same way that math can be, right? If you set up a framework and the framework is agreed upon, right, and then you ask a question about it, right? Like if we all agree that if X is true, then Y is true.
So they become conditional statements.
Right. Which it has to be a conditional statement for the reasons we've already talked about. Right. Then I think that you can make it map to actual propositions. But that's my opinion.
I try to give the example this way, that every form of or every label of position on ethics is an attempt to persuade somebody that their ethics are correct. And I just ask a question like, can you show me that divorce is true that divorce is immoral? How do you demonstrate that that is true or false? Either way, I don't think you can.
Are you intentionally singing into an open mic?
Gotta love.
He's having an adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's all just hope that's not just the sound he makes when he's masturbating.
No, that's the postcoital bliss.
Wow.
And I hope he knows his mic is open.
I hope he doesn't. That'd be even more entertaining.
No, he honestly does.
This is why I always use push to talk.
I don't think he does. Greg.
Okay. Somebody needs to be
wonder if I should-
recording this. This is a drag
Oh,
sound.
we're live, as far as I know.
I sort of wonder if I should mute
Yeah,
him.
we're live.
No, don't mute him. No one mutes Dragon this server.
Yeah, this is
Pounding
why-
on that keyboard.
Yeah. The problem I find is when you try to talk about non-cognitive dispositions and people like to characterize it as going, oh, yay, or oh, no.
I don't think he knows it's live.
Doesn't seem so.
No.
Don't know, but I like the stream thumbnail. It's great.
So.
Tonight on Drag's Erotic ASMR. Perfect.
Oh, wow.
Oh shit, there's like a live chat and people and everything. Why aren't you nerds in the Discord?
Egg, we heard everything, and it wasn't pretty.
It got real quiet and awkward.
I call everybody nerds. I hurt their feelings.
Oh, I'm a nerd. Proud of it.
But you're in the Discord, so I wasn't... you're good. You're all good. Jeez, it's a forest of fucking wrenches in this chat. What the hell?
Yeah. Yes, we heard everything.
Excellent.
Yeah, you
Muted
weren't
himself.
muted at all. It was great.
Okay, well, now that we've got that resolved.
Yeah, there's a text chat in the Discord. In fact, I'm going to make a new text chat just for the live stream.
You sure
really?
they didn't hear it?
I'll say I don't know if you're right on that one.
I mean, we heard you singing.
Yeah, we heard.
Oh, that makes
You
it way
got your
funnier.
Streamlabs mic input muted. That's not fair.
That
Coward.
oddly, that makes it more funny in my head because that means we're all sitting in the room listening to this stuff and then narrating on what we're listening to, but the audience
It's
can't.
way
hear it.
worse.
That was pretty funny.
All we heard was vague singing and her going, oh, hell no.
That we didn't hear, but thank you for filling in that gap in our knowledge.
Or no, she also told you she didn't want the webcam on. You told her where to stand to be naked on cam. Heard that. Assume the position.
For God's sake, please make sure you double check. Both mutes are active.
Put
Please.
some tape over the webcam.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or don't wait, rethinking my position.
Drag, thanks again for
Actually,
promoting
wait a minute.
all that, man.
Okay, so now that everybody can hear me. So yeah, I was just talking to someone on the phone about, kind of the difference between at least the theists in the chat and those of us who aren't theists. We can kind of give you constructive criticism because I didn't think the conversation had much traction. I don't think it really went anywhere.
I think it was a shit show too. It pissed me off, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no,
now, I mean, okay,
understand.
honestly, the conversation didn't piss me off. Him misrepresenting my position pissed me off.
Yeah.
But again, that's G-Man and it's kind of expected. And like I was telling everybody earlier, I don't care if he gets it or not. I want the argument to get out there to where maybe somebody who does get it can come back with me, especially if they're a Christian, and explain to me where the shortcomings are. And you guys, the constructive criticism, me. I love to know how to get better. So I'm never going to look at it as a bad thing for you guys to beat me up right and left. Please do.
Okay, had to get Crow in here. Yeah, and the thing is, when you have people who will argue over minutia, it is hard to kind of go, okay, well, you know what, this conversation could have went better, but here's how it could have been. But at the end of the day, like, you could have presented the best argument ever, even for someone, even to have it tailored towards some of his limited capacity. It still would have been hindered because of who you're talking to. And I think that's kind of what I ran into a little bit in my debate, where I did a little bit more teaching than I should have done debating. But even then, he used a satirical fucking website, so there's little I can do when that's literally the level of evidence that he brings to the table. So
well, and that was and honestly, that's what I tried to do, because I knew I was talking to him. I mean, I would challenge anybody to go back there and give me one word that a high schooler wouldn't have understood when I'm using it. I mean, I purposely kept the verbiage to a point where I was hoping a middle schooler could understand what I was saying.
Middle schoolers are literate.
Well, that's the problem. But like you said, even then, it was obvious even beforehand. But like, your question, give us Ned's position. He has no clue what my position is. And then, I think it was at least one or two other people do the same thing. And he goes, I've already answered that. And I said, no, you haven't, G. You're not even close to answering it.
No, he even went on, because I heard a little bit from his channel, because we were in IHOP and I played it a little bit. And so he went on his channel to do some damage control and say, Drags going to come do some damage control now. It's like, what do I have to do damage control for? I'm not sure he knows what that term actually means, but he still could not articulate the point you were making at all. At no point can he actually do that. Even if he goes back and watches it, he can't actually say anything. And because I was going to have one more super chat, but I needed to preface it, and you only have like 50 characters. If he could name one of the legs that you wanted to attack in your illustration, and I guarantee you he can't do it, because he wasn't paying attention, for one. Two, he didn't care. And three, it's just a shit show.
Yeah,
ultimately that's the problem.
He doesn't understand what it means for an argument to have legs. That's the problem. Like, no metaphors. You cannot use anything that is not extremely literal.
Yeah,
and
that's the
less than 2 syllables.
That is a huge negation. I don't know if you saw the 3-hour sit down I had with him. He literally cannot understand any analogies. He can't make them. He can't understand them.
I'm pretty sure I saw parts of it. I don't know if I saw the entire thing, but I'm pretty sure I know what you're referencing.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know how to argue against a conceptual being without using concepts. I mean, we don't have God to sit down here and go, hey, this is what he looks like. This is what he feels like. This is what he does. These are, for lack of a better term, it's been 2,000 years, at least arguably, since he's done anything. So all we can do is infer what he's like based on 2,000-year-old writings. And how do you get there without making an analogy? I don't know. And maybe that's my shortcoming. I mean, I'll be honest. But I mean, again, it was more, he asked me, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. And then when we contacted, and again, thanks for getting me in contact with him as well. Debate for You, he seemed really excited, and I'm like, all right, fine. Well, I'll put it out there. And honestly, my hope is that someone that does understand what I'm trying to say there will come back and say, "Hey, Ned, let's talk. I want to show you where I feel that, this is not working."
Yeah, yeah. I think a few people. I think SJ was one of them. And I think one of G-Man's kind of typical supplicants, Carmel Crunk. I think she wanted to have some type of discussion, I believe. But there should be a few people from the chat that want to actually discuss the topic, at length. Because I think that there's definitely merit to discussing it with someone who can, conceptualize analogies. And that's something that, I joke about it when I do my G-Man construction or deconstruction videos, but it's absolutely true. He is, and I had people kind of sit down and think about that. Anything that you have and after this, I'm going to actually go and lay down with the wife. Think about anything that you've had to learn in your lifetime. Think about all of the different heuristics that you've had to use to acquire that bit of information. If you've used analogies, think about just how many times in one single year that you've had to use an analogy to learn something. Now, take that away.
Oh, yeah. I mean, man, I teach. I mean, that's what I do for a living. And if I could not use analogy, there's no way. I mean, there's absolutely no, and what I teach is a practical skill for the most part. It's not, I'm not teaching theoretical physics here. So if I couldn't take my class and walk them down using an analogy, there's no way you can get these concepts across.
And that's part of the issue when you're dealing with him, is that because you're handicapped, well, he has a handicap, but you're handicapped in trying to put forth your position, especially if it's very nuanced. And that when you start making some of these illustrations and you have to start drawing things that are analogous to one another, he can't mentally do that. And so even if he tries to make an analogy, they end up falling apart. There's actually a thing on the soundboard here where he tries to make one. And even recently, he tries to make an analogy that deals with like morality and something to do with humans and roaches. He can't mentally do it. And I've never in my life encountered someone that can't understand analogy. And he's upset. He's in the chat. I mean, you can feel free to come in here and say that I'm wrong. But in our discussion, G-Man, people have the timestamp on there where I give you a clear analogy. And I preface it and say, I know I tell people not to do this. I'm going to give you a very simple analogy. And G-Man did not understand a very simple analogy, a very simple one. There has not been a time where I've ever observed him comprehend an analogy. And that's literally what you're dealing with. And G-Man can feel free to call me a liar. Go on your channel right now, make an analogy, make a video, make an analogy. And I will retract my statement and I'll say that I was wrong. So.
Or better yet, let him come in here and I'll make the most basic analogy, or I'm sure you can too, of what we know and things that literally my 8-year-old will understand when I put it to him this way. And let's see if he can follow it. I mean, if he can do it, great.
He's more than welcome. He's been invited in. I mean, it's not precluded to anybody other than warning, but he can't follow it. If you ask him to literally make an analogy about anything, it does not matter. He can't do it. And he will make every single excuse he can as to why he can't or won't do it. Other than, I am mentally incapable of understanding what an analogy is or how they operate.
He doesn't learn.
Well, it compounds the problem because the word that is published in his Bible that is supposedly inerrant doesn't fit the narrative that he wants to happen. He wants to change the definition of, namely evil and wicked, and then wants to somehow redefine those words while not being able to make analogies and understand abstract concepts. I'm telling you, that was eye-opening to me. Just how bad, once going down that rabbit hole and saying that, from a hermeneutical standpoint, you can't do this because the Greek and the Roman, the Greek and the Hebrew do not say evil. Yeah. What? I mean,
anything, especially if it's like Polysemous, he's not going to understand. If you are trying to discuss something that's a bit more, like I said, a bit more nuanced, when it comes to direct evil, like you physically harming someone, or kind of indirect evil as you placing someone in a position to be harmed, he can't understand that because it's not a direct, there's not a direct mechanism there for him to physically look at. And a part of it is a little bit of his dishonesty on his part, because he has somewhat described certain scenarios, but I'm not willing to necessarily go there just yet. I'd rather have a bit more evidence for that. But so, like I said, I'm gonna head out of here. Feel free to talk, folks, and I'm gonna mute my computer so I won't be able to hear shit.
All right. Well, I'm going to go in about 5 minutes. And again, Drag, thanks, but I appreciate all the work.
Can anyone hear me? So, of curiosity.
Can now, yeah.
Okay, cool. I've been only screwing with my mic settings.
Yeah, Jay, you're pretty quiet though.
Yeah, I'm afraid to even change anything. Mic on my laptop sucks. Negation, if you can hear me, if I need to, I can go back and adjust the settings. But he says he's had 3 or 4 conversations with you before in the past.
Yeah, with probably going back to at least, I don't know, early 2000. Probably 2012 was probably our first discussion. Yeah, that was back in the day where he was claiming that he had proof for the power of prayer. And back in those days, I think.
That wasn't
what's that?
That wasn't the safe incident, was it?
That was just after that. It was probably a month or 2 after that. And we, back in those days, Debate for You, there's a radio station or talk radio or something out of New York that was apparently the place to be, at least what he claimed. And I was like, yeah, I'm more than will, let's do it. And I came a lot more loaded for bear because I didn't know who he was at that point. And I, had the Templeton Foundation studies. I had, for the first 15 minutes, I was just nothing but statistics and, showing that, nothing supports prayer. In fact, the converse, at least for the Templeton Foundation study, was, showing the opposite to be true. People that knew they were being prayed for died at a faster rate. And again, it was another kind of shit show deal to where he kind of blew off everything I said and ignored it. Honestly, the best part, if you ever watch that, unless you just care about all the stats, I would skip most of the conversation and go to the Q&A, the people, because they literally called into that show. And there was some very interesting conversations between, there's one lady in particular that held G-Man to task about kids, him saying that, kids basically deserve what they get. And, and literally from a, like being raped or abused standpoint. And she, it was good. She took him to task on that. And then there was a couple of other times. One time it got a little heated because he tried to pull the stupid little pre-sup argument, and I have no tolerance for that whatsoever because I know what John Calvin was doing. All that is closing the mouths of the obstreperous. You're not trying to learn. You're not trying to have a conversation. You're just trying to shame the other person into silence, which is, as an educator, that just completely rubs me the absolute opposite way because you're shutting down real learning. You're making sure that people can't learn. I think we had another debate on morality, which again, I should know better at this point, but I'm not doing anything and it's fun. And like I said, I've been tweaking this for a while and I kind of want to see if it floats. That's the main reason for throwing it out there.
I don't catch Skyler.
You're breaking up bad, man.
Yeah, Jay, your mic's in and out every couple of words. Ned, I think what would be interesting is if you can see what you can get him to agree to just by phrasing it differently. The same concepts you're trying to get across, just tweak the phrasing and see if he'll agree to them.
And we had a discussion with Hannah, and only on the first leg of this. And he literally, that's how the conversation started. As I said, is God all good? Is God all powerful? Is God basically what I did in the video to begin with? And he agreed to every foundational issue or foundational prescription for his God, and then starts backpedaling immediately. Another thing that was, this is a totally off topic, but it reminded me of this, is that it was around a Christmas show, and I'd called into a Christian radio program because they were talking about how great Joseph was and how great of a father and, all of that. And I basically made the claim that, Joseph was not Jesus's father. And he wanted me to come on and defend that. And I'm like, okay, I just let him talk for however long, saying how great Joseph was and how both Mark and Luke, wherever the genealogy is, I think it's Matthew actually, sets the genealogy, and that's how we know that Jesus was of the bloodline of David. And I'm just letting him ramble. And then I go, really? Because last time I checked, Mary was a virgin. So exactly what part did Joseph play in this? And the backpedaling, it's predictable that no matter how much you agree with him and then you show him where the flaws are, just like today, I showed him 6 different passages where it specifically said God creates and or uses evil, wickedness, however you want to phrase it. Oh no, it doesn't mean that. Which,
well, yeah, that's
again,
the irony of calling the act of making up excuses for why biblical passages don't say what they actually say is called apologetics. I love it. You have to apologize for the book, but you got to realize Yahweh was an alien genetic scientist. So he took some of Joseph's sperm, teleported it out of his body, added God's stuff to it, and zapped it into Mary. So she's still a virgin. No sex happened, but Joseph is still the father.
And if he would have been intelligent enough to go there, I would concede that point. I'd say, hey, if that's what happened, you're right. Absolutely. Good job.
Just if you're a fan of The Next Generation, explain all things that God does in terms of Q and snapping your fingers. And there you go. You can illustrate how silly it is. Or you could talk, like I said, you could talk with General Han Solo, and if you let him talk long enough, he will remove the need for God to do anything. Like, I talked to him about the Exodus plagues, right? Every single one he found a perfectly naturalistic explanation for. And it was great. And at the end, I was like, okay, so God doesn't have to do anything. How do you know God did anything? What are we talking about here?
Because I have faith. That's good enough for me and everybody else.
Oh, yeah, it was some ad hoc. I honestly don't remember what his explanation was. Other than, like, how could they have gotten it written down? How could they have gotten it written down in a book if God didn't do it? Or something along those lines. Or prophecy or something, One of the vagaries.
I don't know. And again, I think that it's my own fault. I'll go away for a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, and then come back in the same naive, self-delusional state that, hey, somebody is going to be able to step up and, argue this stuff. After literally a decade of playing this game, almost a decade and a half. Well, maybe not that long, about a decade now of doing this, and at least online, nobody being able to do it. I mean, and that's what got me in trouble at Oral Roberts is I started asking questions.
Your G inoculation every so often.
Apparently, like it slaps me back to reality.
Well, you're talking about a person who doesn't realize that under New Jersey law, there's a difference between finding something and theft by finding. And who somehow thinks he's going to get paid for doing work on a house that he never got the owner to sign a contract for because he got his contractor buddies to do the work without pay. I don't understand how that works. Like, I know contractors. That doesn't fucking happen. So who knows? It's absolutely insane.
Well, I mean, but the problem is, I mean, especially you look back, the people that I've tried to engage with, I've tried to run the gambit. I mean, like you said, I've gone to Hovind, both of them. I've had a debate with Eric and Kent, Cy10, Matt Slick. I mean, if they're out there, I'm willing to talk to them.
I'll tell you, you gotta pick in an honest one. It'll be a world of difference.
Well,
like people were just suggesting S.J. Thompson because she was like congratulating G-Man in the text chat on points he was making.
Yeah, I've spoken with SJ in the past. I'd love to talk to her again. I mean, I like SJ a lot.
I think it'd be interesting. I do think you're going to run into the wall of ad hoc, like, that's just a mystery because God knows the future type stuff.
Okay, that plays exactly into where my argument is that yes, God knows the future, and therefore He needs to starve 10,000 kids a day. That is a necessity for His plan. Therefore, those kids starving is a good thing.
Okay. No, this the point I was trying to make earlier. Basically, you're saying God is an objectivist, which is hilarious. Somebody brought up Ayn Rand, like in the before Drag went live, and so basically, God is an objective. There's no real altruism. Just what God does is altruistic because He's the best.
Wait,
exactly.
Ayn Rand in that debate?
No. This was like before Drag took us live. I was talking with I think Nicola and Spackle were in here.
Oh, okay.
And they said something about Ayn Rand, and
But yeah, I mean, if SJ's watching or SJ sees this, and or anybody talks to her, tell her please. I mean, I trust her enough that I would go on her channel or whatever. She's not. I'm not worried about appearing where she would want to meet.
I bet you could get her on Twitter and then set up something to do on Modern Day Debate with her.
Yeah, again, I don't have. I'm too old, man. I don't have Twitter. I'm an old guy.
Not before me.
Oh, Jay, are you gonna debate SJ?
I've been asking her, but she seems to avoid me like a plague, which most Christian theists seem to do.
G-Man and analogies is like a fish out of lava. That's great.
So, and that's the other thing that is problematic. I went on one time. In fact, back in the day, I was actually on Bible Thumping Wingnut's panel doing Bible studies every Wednesday. And that lasted about 3 weeks, and he didn't like the questions I posed, and he quit doing Bible study. But we actually used to get along quite well. And, he invited me on his show to talk to Matt Slick about another one of my arguments, one of the precept deals that I did. And after that, I told Matt, look, you're supposed to be the man when it comes to morality. Let me know. I'd love to talk to you on this. And I mean, he won't even return an email. I mean, and I've got his direct line because of being on the, with Tim for a while. And that's the problem is
once anybody figures out the script, they can't deal with it.
Did Hogtie just guys hold on to your butts?
Bring it, Hogtie. I don't have long.
Wait, is Hogtie about to reboot the park fences?
It's just, Hogtie. He just, I love hearing him talk, but my God, that guy can fucking talk.
Hogtie is the only person I know who can interrupt himself and talk about a tangent that he brought up. Great. It's brilliant.
You hadn't been around me enough, man. Telling
you. I've lurked and listened to you talk, but no, Hogtie is the master.
Hogtie and Sokka are probably two of the biggest talkers I've ever. And Sokka's calmed down as far as I can tell. But Hogtie, love Hogtie's. I like Hogtie's knowledge. I have no problem with Hogtie whatsoever. But my God, that fucker can talk. Jesus.
There's got to be something you can do about your volume.
Is it really low or what?
It's extremely low.
I boosted his volume individually for myself, so that it doesn't like mess up the
it's
stream.
It's maxed on my board, but if it's low for me, then it should be low for the live stream. So I'm guessing that he just needs to bump it up on his, manually on his end.
Hold the laptop against your face.
I do have it next to my.
If that doesn't work, try hitting yourself with a laptop.
No, I've already worn out the service plan on this laptop thanks to that. I hate this laptop. I hate it.
Didn't Drag say G-Man was in the live chat earlier?
Yeah, I thought he said he was too.
Yeah, he was in the
Oh, why didn't he come in? I want to talk to G-Man.
Yeah, he was, but he won't come in here. He's too chicken.
Yeah, he's too chicken to come in here.
Did I somehow just lose everybody?
No, I hear you.
Okay. All right. It just went dead real quiet, so I was worried that somehow I hit something. But anyway, guys, I'm supposed to be in class at 8 a.m. and it's already 1 o'clock here, so we're getting to be 1 o'clock. So
Yeah.
unless anybody's got anything, Hogtie, I hate to see you and run because we never get to talk, man. It seems like we're just always coming and going. But if not, I'm going to drop out. And again, guys, if y'all see anybody or if y'all watch it, I mean, I like constructive criticism. Tear me up. I want to know what screwed up with that argument. So feel free, hammer me.
I got to say, it was good. It was good. It was good almost bumping into you again. Sorry, I'm sort of feminized. I'm doing a lot of chores, so I had my hands in the sink. But I was listening to the discussion. I'll say, I know you're on your way out, but I'll say I listened to only about 2 minutes of the debate. I just had my fill of G-Man not understanding, like effortfully not understanding someone else's point, and like his whole, like it's just. So I just got a little tired of it, but I will watch it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I mean, especially you, Hogtie, I mean, I respect your opinion, and I definitely want to hear criticism if you've got it. I put a little kind of a montage together to try to pull together the arguments that I'm trying to make. And let me know what you think, man. I mean, I would love to.
Wait,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll certainly feel free to do so. The interesting thing I find about the discussion, so I kind of joined the discussion. Actually, when I joined the discussion was when the first thing I heard was somebody say, "Does he know his microphone's open?" And then people were laughing, and I had to check my phone to make sure I wasn't doing something stupid. Then I realized, oh, you guys are listening to Drag. So actually, I missed the first bit of it, but that's when I got here. What I find funny about it is that the discussion I have heard since that time, since the amusing thing with Drag, was a lot of like, well, could this have been better, or what do you think of this? And there's a lot of very sort of self-critical and kind of group critical, whereas that all a Christian does in this case is just be like, I stomped a mud hole in him. Like there's no reflection, no self-evaluation, right?
Yeah,
like he won't for a second think that he did. I mean, this is the guy who people pointed this out before several times, but the guy who used a satirical website as his like source of quote unquote evidence, and then when Drag rightly pointed out in the debate, well, that's a satirical website. Like you can't, like what is wrong with you? Immediately they had hangouts on his channel and True Empiricism's channel where they all sat around and they talked about how awesome that was, and they were completely supportive of such an idiotic decision. And in fact, they were critical of any criticism that arose. So that when they would say, well, oh, they're saying that it was wrong to use this. Drag was saying it was satirical to use the wrong website. Well, that's a it borders on which fallacy?
Straw man.
Where you're blaming the source. No, where you're blaming the source. Genetic fallacy. Yes. Yeah, they were saying, well, it just borders on the genetic fallacy, and then by the end of the conversation, they convinced themselves it's genetic fallacy to point out that G-Man's proof of stolen giant remains being posted on a satirical website. It's a genetic fallacy to say, yeah, we got that from a satirical website. They're just not at all self-critical. They don't criticize each other. They're not at all thoughtful or contemplative about things like this. So I'm going to guess from the discussion I've heard, it went way better than the way you guys are describing it.
I don't know, man. I mean, again, probably the most telling aspect of it was G got asked at least 3 times in the Q&A section, can you describe Negation's position? And he never could. I mean, not even close.
Oh, in the Q&A. Oh, okay. I get what you guys are. Okay. Yeah. Well, that doesn't. I mean, that shouldn't surprise anyone. In fact, that's a great question. But that's you listen to G-Man have a conversation with somebody. When like it's like he almost listens. Like he listens just long enough to hear one or two keywords. And as soon as he thinks of the thing he's going to say, like you may have a point. You have 2 minutes on the mic or whatever, and you may be building to a point, and along the way, you touch on an example to illustrate a point, and then you move on and you actually make your main point, the thing that he ought to listen to and needs to respond to. Nope, he heard 2 keywords in the first 10 seconds, and then he sits there and he bounces and he rocks and he puts a big grin in his face. He starts playing with his hat and just bounces around because he's just waiting for you to stop talking so that it's his turn to talk, so he can go run off like an insane person with 2 words he heard in the first 10 seconds of you speaking.
Well, the problem is you use more than 7 words. You can't use more than 7 words. It doesn't work.
Well,
he didn't understand negations. He didn't understand Ned's summary of his point. He didn't understand his own point when Ned said it back to him.
Yeah, and that I did use like 7 words. I mean, I tried to keep it as simple and as just concise as possible, and he still didn't get it.
Well, that's a bit of a G-Man peculiar thing. I've and I approach conversations with everybody, at least at the outset. Is just pretend like they're a normal person and just have a normal conversation like you would if you're sitting in a coffee shop with them. So G-Man will say something and I'll say, well, what are you talking about? And then he'll explain it. I'll go, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. And I'll actually do that thing where you steel man them, right? But because you're not just trying to look for, he does, like he just looks for a chink in the armor. But I'll go, okay, I get your point. So what you're saying is this. Okay, I get it. Well, then that raises this question. No, that's not what I said. And he's going to then pick on some tiny, tiny little word choice or something. He absolutely refuses to let someone else paraphrase his stated position.
And yep, I mean, and that was pretty much it in a nutshell. Not only that, but everything from that to him trying to redefine words in his Bible after I ask him, is the King James Version of the Bible inerrant? Absolutely. And then when I read passages, he redefines words. And I'm like, how can it be inerrant when you have to prescribe a different meaning to the word than what's there? Which, of course, it is. That's what it means.
Well, when it can't be wrong if you can redefine it as you need to.
I agree. So it just, but
it's like, how can it be wrong if you can erase the answer and write a new one in there?
And no matter what the answer is, it's always right.
Someone needs to explain to him that that's how science works. If you get it wrong, you do it again until you get the right answer. So the Bible is science. There you go.
Exactly. But no, anyway, I mean, there's about I think it's an 11-minute video that I tried to put together to consolidate the 3 legs. Basically, I used the 3-legged stool analogy or whatever, and went to kicking legs out of the stool to show that, in my opinion anyway, there is no foundation for Christians using their God or scripture as a basis for morality. It all falls apart with every leg of the stool. And again, that's probably a mistake on my part, especially with G-Man. Using an analogy is not the best choice. But again, how do you teach without analogies? I'm an educator and I don't know. So, but
well, sorry, my question is, and I'm pretty sure this, I haven't been watching the stream or anything. I watched most of the discussion earlier. So I'm not sure what you guys have covered over here, but have we discussed at all about the title of the debate? And
we did, in that I never got to defend the secular side of morality, or why I think a secular worldview is a better basis.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're getting at, Sokka?
Yeah. I'm sure that's been covered, right? That the discussion was about, what's a better moral framework,
right?
The Christian viewpoint or the secular viewpoint, and the the Christian viewpoint from G-Man was just, my Bible, and that's it. I mean, wasn't even prepared, didn't take it seriously, didn't really, actually have any real points to bring up other than just, yeah, hey, Bible says, type thing, which is just stupid.
Exactly. But argument from authority all the way across the board. And then when I tried to redirect, redirect 3 times. In fact, the reason I didn't go into it in depth in my opener was because I figured he was going to jump all over a secular worldview being.
Yeah, but you didn't, in all fairness, you didn't have an opener.
I touched on it. I touched on it at the very beginning in that, the book that I was going to use and
your entire opener was just already it was essentially just like a pre-made rebuttal. Like you didn't bring up any points that arguing for the position that you had to.
And honestly, what I was trying to do in that, because before I had him play the video, I tried to open the can of worms, and I thought that's all it would take. And again, that's my fault in that, I said, look, I believe, and I even used the buzzword for him to let him open the door. And I thought that would hook him in that I think evolution accounts for morality. And I think I can defend it from evolution and nature. And here's the book I'll be citing from, and here's the author. I've got, and I provided all the links for it where you can buy the book, where you can look up this guy and whatever. And, I really want to go down this road, or however I phrased it, and then said from there, play the video. And I figured that he would jump on that, ignore the video. I just want to get the argument out there, and then we could focus on the natural explanation for morality. And honestly, I was really surprised that he wanted to go back into the video and talk about his God. And I mean, if you look at it, he started both conversations. And even when I kept, because 2 more times during that conversation, I brought up, wanting to discuss how I would defend a natural deal. He won't have any part of it. He wouldn't, which shocked me because he usually loves talking about evolution. So, and again, maybe I should have pushed it more. Maybe I should have just, I don't know. But, to be fair, I do think I've got a pretty decent defense if somebody wants to talk about that. But I also want that argument with the 3 legs to be out there. So somebody that does understand analogy and can actually comprehend what I'm trying to put forth will try to take it apart and show me where it doesn't work.
What you should have done, I mean, as part of your thing, that you create the 3 criteria for morals, with the 3 supports that form some type of foundation for it. And that would have been a good position to start from if you were, if you put that as kind of the standard. Be like, listen, when we talk about morals and we're talking about, different foundations for this, these are the, 3 aspects that have to hold up any type of moral framework. And then present your argument for why secular morality somehow fulfills this.
Okay, absolutely.
And so your opening statement is like, listen, like under the secular moral view, these are the 3 things that we require. Look at this. Here's how I explain those 3 things. And then in your rebuttal, just like you did, then that's when you go into like let's take a look at their view with the 3 things I said. Now, and then you put the objective on the table for what you expect them to do. Like, I've just knocked out the 3 legs of your argument. How are you going to do that to mine? And every single time that they fail to do so, you just be like, again, he has not attacked the 3 legs that I have done, and that you can go about it that way. But
that's what I was trying to do, because again, I thought that he would come back, and my rebuttal during the conversation was going to be exactly that. When he said, because I assumed from square one he was going to start cackling and laughing about evolution and how you don't have any proof and all that stuff. And I was going to go, okay, then I want you to use the same criteria that I just used. And let's look at those 3 legs. can we have a system? Can morals even exist with a naturalistic type explanation from an evolutionary standpoint, and explore that logic? Can you identify right and wrong in that system? And then most importantly, can you, or not most importantly, but finally, can you justify those decisions that you've made using purely evolutionary driven parameters? And that's the whole, I mean, I've got pages on how to defend that, because again, maybe I'm too naive on this, but I thought that evolution was his kind of buzzword. And when somebody would bring it up, he would just jump all over it and just laugh and cackle and whatever. So I didn't figure I needed more than just that little preface of kind of throwing out the bait of, here's evolution. Yes, it's subjective. And yes, it is based in, the natural progression of a species, at least a communal species. And I thought that would be enough. And therefore I've set the standard there. Now I'm going to kick out all the legs of Christianity, hoping that he would come back and say, yeah, I honestly figured he was just going to ignore it and go after me. And he did the exact opposite. So I was surprised. I really was.
But I mean, you didn't leave him a lot to go after. Like, that's the problem, is that like you never really made a case for secular morality. Like that's the whole problem. I mean, you brought up kind of a quick point, but like, you never made the case. The entire thing was focused on just making the case against him, which is, just not the best way to go about it. But I mean, that's not my biggest criticism. My biggest criticism is, why the fuck did you debate G-Man? But
because he asked and he wouldn't leave me the hell alone. I mean, this has been in the work for like 2 months, because he started, then he wanted to do it on his channel. I said, you're out of your mind. I'm not doing that. Number one, I really don't give a shit about it. And unless you make it something I want to do, I'm not going to do it. And then we kept going back and forth and back and forth. And I told Drag about it. And Drag was like, well, see if, I mean, I'm sure, modern day debates would like to have you guys. And I'm like, all right, well. So he got me in contact with him, and, James was very excited and very happy. And I'm like, all right, fine, we'll do it. And then, like I said, you're right, Sokka. I should have come out a lot more matter of fact about my position, not assuming that G-Man would effectively take the bait. And, I mean, you're right. I don't know how to put it other than I'm not going to do it again because it's pointless. But the next time that somebody wants to do this, unless they specifically want to talk about that argument, you're absolutely right. I'm going to say, I mean, I can go into it right now, but it's what shit. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here, and I got to be up in like 5 hours. But I mean, those legs, in my opinion, from an evolutionary standpoint, are very, very easy to defend. And there are absolutely, again, maybe I'm being way overconfident. I'm going to be taken to task if I ever get to this point, but easily defendable and explainable through the evolutionary process. I think there are. And I've got them down. I can do it. And maybe that's the thing, is I need to make a companion video to that little montage that I made that does the exact opposite, that just defends, more of a, I don't like to use naturalism, because then people get in the wrong use, or not the wrong, I'm using it wrong. But you know what I mean? More evolutionary based than anything else as far as where it was derived from. And it's an emergent property from virtually any and every communal species. And we can see it across the board.
That doesn't really, to say, like, if the question is about like what moral systems are superior, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's what the discussion's about. It was about, what's the better moral system, which is, interesting. Like, which is about value judgments. Which one of these moral systems would bring more value? So even from then, if you just say well, evolution,
that's
using evolution though in an argument for morals is just as vacuous as saying God.
Okay, and again, since you haven't heard my entire argument, but let's just go into it a little bit from a pragmatic standpoint. If I have a system that is benefiting the herd, the species, the tribe, whatever you want to put it, that system is going to, at least from an evolutionary standpoint, it should provide an advantage. That group should be able to exist and prosper more than one that doesn't incorporate that system. Therefore, if I can show, number one, where evolution, where morality and ethics and fairness emerged from, and from an evolutionary standpoint, and why it's an advantage for herd species to use those, then not only does it show its foundation, but it also shows from a pragmatic sense that it is better because it gives you an advantage and it gives you a testable, demonstrable way of doing things that will benefit whatever society is doing. And from there, now we can break it out and look at all of the social experiments that are constantly going on throughout humanity and seeing what ethics, what system of ethics seems to be winning out, for lack of a better term, over other ones. So, we look at dictatorships, we look at oligarchies, we look at all of the ones that don't seem to be advantageous and watch how they tend to evaporate, whereas more of and again, in the US, this is going to drive people nuts, but more of a democratic socialist type systems seem to have their societies prosper and grow and become stronger and stronger nations. That, in my opinion, that gives us a foundation, number one, for where it is, and number two, why it is a better system than God told me to do it. I follow orders, even though there's nothing of substance behind that system, because again, none of the legs stand. Does that make sense, Sokka? Or am I, again, just rattling on?
Well, I mean, using evolution in a moral discussion for an explanation for why animals that live in social groups have a greater chance of survival. That's right. Yeah, okay, that's fine. There's some you can point to evolution to why group behavior would be beneficial for some animals, but not all animals. No. Not every single animal benefits from that. But if you just want to start off with the argument by saying that hey, we're social animals, well, yep. What are we saying by that? Where do we go in the argument from we're social animals? We talked, because the topic of morality at that point in time is the rules in which rational social animals kind of dictate what they're doing, but is that really what provides the foundation? It might be an explanation for why we live in groups, but does it really provide an explanation for what those morals are, or guide the basic rules of how we interact with each other? What is the goal of it at that point in time?
I would think it would. Why wouldn't it?
Well, because if let's say that through evolution it benefits us not to piss off the people in our group. Okay, then it's just as applicable to say that good actions then within a group would be those actions which you can do without getting caught, without any type of guidance for why we should act in any way other than that. Is that, act in such a way that you don't get caught, trespassing against the group. And that's a perfectly valid, now at that point in time, evolutionary explanation for how we act inside of a group, and but doesn't really provide a criteria that you can, that we would advocate for.
Can I interject?
again-
Can I interject here, please? Can I interject? See, the evolutionary argument, though, forget about the group. It's about self-preservation. It's about well-being, self-well-being, and that's where that's where it all stems from. Because we're social creatures, yes, but the decisions we make for the benefit of the group start out as individual decisions of self-preservation, and
that's not what evolution is based on. A species or a group dynamic. It's not an individual. It's not an individual benefiting. It's the entire species benefiting.
I agree with Jay on this one.
The sense of well-being, the sense of self-preservation is evolutionary.
Yeah, it is. But again, it's more about, okay, so look at it like this. Where, if it is purely selfish, for lack of a better term, there's no altruistic dimension to evolution. Why would herd animals put the young of their group on the inner part of a circle and allow themselves to be killed literally in preservation of those calves? Why would a mother defend it?
I never said that there was no altruism in it. Okay, but I'm saying what the basis of it is, what the initial kernel of it is well-being of self, is self-preservation, and then other things stem from that. Then you have, the ability of abstract thought and to empathize, to realize what might injure my self-preservation, and then to be able to carry that over to say, oh wow, that might also injure self-preservation for my the fellow members of my group.
So, Jay, do you mind if I take a stab at your point? If that's okay.
Well, let me, because evolution.
I can articulate it in just a slightly different way that maybe will make a little bit more sense. If that's okay.
Go ahead, Sokka.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, survival of animals in the wild is, to a certain extent, always going to be kind of egocentric. That the binding into group behavior, into herds, is done because it increases an individual's chance of survival. So even though that group behaviors might be selected upon, those group behaviors are not done because of any type of desire for the group to survive, but could be because of a desire for an individual to survive. So if there was a greater chance of survival in a group, to appeal to that group, to be part of that group, could be done for purely self-interest. And if that's what guarantees a greater survival, then yeah, great, you go become part of a group. But that greatest chance of survival is still going to be out of self-interest. Now, so that's what you're going to get out of if you base it purely on evolution, you're basically peering on stuff that is going to be out of purely self-interest. But this means now that evolution doesn't actually provide a basis for things like duty or altruism. There's nothing within evolution that will select for those types of behaviors, because the only reason why there's the group behaviors in the first place is purely out of self-interest.
See, and I think that's where we have a fundamental disagreement. I look at it like this. There are species out there that are purely altruistic. And the one that comes to mind most readily is the honeybee. Every honeybee in the hive will sacrifice itself to preserve the queen. That is because, from an evolutionary standpoint, those drones do not have any chance of allowing the species to continue, their genetic diversity to continue. And evolution is based on successive generations. of populations, not of individuals. If you're going to break it down and make everything into the individual surviving, you don't have explanations for a myriad of actions that most animals take. There's very, very few animals that.
But here's the problem, even with the honeybee example. Okay, if altruism can be a behavior that's selected upon, that can be passed down through evolutionary means, as in it has somehow benefits the ability for something to reproduce. And you see that the most altruistic bees, you just said yourself, are not ones that reproduce. So because then altruism is not being selected upon for those species, for the bees at that point in time. Because even if they're altruistic, they're not passing on any type of the behaviors or anything to any type of offspring.
The individual, okay, again, Socken, maybe I misheard you, but what you seem to be arguing for is the individual takes precedence over the herd and or species.
At a certain level, it does. At a certain level, everything becomes self-interested. Then
explain the honeybee.
Sure, explain how altruistic behavior gets selected and passed on to generations in something that doesn't breed.
Because when it started, okay, I mean, the best book that I know of on this, well, I don't want to change gears on you, but if you got, it's a fairly quick read. It's only a couple hundred pages, and I think it's like $15 or $20 on Amazon. It's called A Natural History of Human Morality. And the guy who wrote it is the co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Anthropology. His name's Michael Tomasello. Now, granted, I don't agree with everything he says there. And I think he's missing, especially when you look at dolphins, killer whales, I think there's some gaps there. But the way he lays out the way evolution can account for altruism and fairness in humanity makes, in my opinion, very, very good sense. And what it is that basically the main difference between us and the other great apes, one of the main differences is that we not only gather, but we hunt. And when we gather and hunt, we don't do it from an individual standpoint. We do it as a collective. In other words, if me and you are out in the wilderness and there's a tree that has fruit on it, but the fruit is so high that it would require that you stand on my shoulders or vice versa, and we work together, we will do that as long as both of us carry out our roles. In that, if you're going to climb up there and get it, you're not going to take all the fruit and keep it for yourself. You're going to divide it in a way that is at least somewhat fair to the work that was provided. That makes sense in how humans developed in from the way that they came up, and created everything from tribes all the way up through city-states and nations like that we have today. That's the main difference between us and the great apes as far as what has happened. That is not an individual drive.
Of course it is. So why wouldn't it be? Like, are you doing something that benefits your survival?
Yes, but you're also okay. Is
your survival dependent upon keeping something else alive to help you with that?
Okay, then let's go to the other end of that. Let's say that we have a mother that is going to sacrifice. Well, again, we can go with that example, and you're right. I can see where you're saying that could be considered individualistic, somewhat.
At its core, it's individualistic. Like, it's the very thing. At its core is basically individual.
Okay, well then, all right. Well then let's look at that, I guess, more closely. You are the
Ned, real quick though too. you mentioned altruism. Altruism is also can be from selfish motivations,
Okay,
individual choices.
right, but it also can be purely altruistic in that it's self-harming to the individual that's performing the act.
I
So
don't think there's such a thing as pure altruism. There's always a selfish motivation involved in it, no matter how good you are.
Okay, maybe from a emotional standpoint, but from a physical and survival standpoint, there's absolutely actions that will take you out of the gene pool and that will completely undermine your self-preservation. We see it every day. So from an evolutionary standpoint, it would make absolutely no sense if we're looking at trying to preserve ourselves instead of preserve the species or preserve the herd. But anyway, going back, Sokka, to what you're saying as far as, us standing on each other's shoulders being a self-motivated action. Well, again, it would make more sense that the person that got the fruit, the person that was standing on the shoulders, wouldn't share it at that point. They would just keep it. Why not? You get what I'm saying?
Sorry. Yeah, because the next time they need fruit, they have an easy way to do it for themselves. And all they have to do is pay off somebody to help them.
But the first time that it happened, the selfish one, right? The selfish one would have kept all the fruit, and the one that was more altruistic would have died off. So it would have, if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, it would make more sense that evolution would have selected for the selfish ones to survive, while the suckers that are standing as, being nothing more than stepping stools would have died off. There's nothing driving the one that's taking advantage to share the first time.
Yeah, the continued need to eat, because, yeah.
But you're talking about, at least and again, I'm going to take this back as far as I possibly can, to a primitive humanoid that doesn't have the I would assume, doesn't have the foresight to see that type of thing any more than a 2-year-old can really see it now. And I mean, we can see it in the great apes now. The great apes don't do it.
Yeah, but the problem is that these behaviors, okay, that you just described as well too, is that there's a certain aspect of maybe being part of a social species where you get born into it, you get born into a community there. But new techniques can be developed within that species, such as climbing on each other's shoulders. Okay, but that's okay. With that being said, all right, is that at its core, okay, when you take a look at why do animals group together in the first place, it's going to be because survival in numbers. It's right. You didn't have primitive apes come together one day, meet up in a field, and be like, hey, you know what? If we hunt together, this is going to work out. We evolved as a social species. Okay, we started off at a certain point. Yeah, but the reason why we started off that way was because of self-interest. And as the group develops, as the group evolves, and the things they do change, and their culture evolves and stuff, they're still part of that social group. But at its core, the reason why they're a social group is because there's a certain investment in their own self-interest. Anything that comes out of that is still going to be there for their self-interst.
But over time, the more altruistic, the more cooperative, the more, I guess, self-sacrificing will provide enough of an advantage that the selfish, the ones that are self-interested, are going to be ostracized, or going to be, for lack of a better term, bred out of existence.
What about the other example that I brought up? Is what about the ones that aren't ostracized? Well, what happens if what develops from that is a mentality of don't get caught. Okay, like if we went that way instead, where something like that could develop as well, and evolution could be the explanation for that as well.
But what I'm saying is those would be outliers in that the vast majority, especially in a very tight knit.
How do you say?
Let me finish.
Majority?
Because
I mean, I know you're painting like a hypothetical here, but you're assuming all the criteria went exactly this way, that evolution is developed this amazingly altruistic.
What I'm assuming is what I think anthropology supports, in that we started off as small tribal groups. And if you're in a small tribal group and you're gaming the system, it's going to be relatively rare that you're going to be able to get away with it. Now, granted,
how about this? How many people do you know, like right now, that would self-sacrifice themselves for a complete stranger in their group?
For a complete stranger, probably not many.
Okay. So, how many people?
I would say, if I had to put a number on it, I would say probably a majority, probably somewhere between 50 and 75%.
Right. So what behavior do you think? What behavior do you think is dominant that was selected for?
You mean now, like within the last 2,000, 3,000 years, or the last 200,000 years?
I'm saying you look at the behaviors of people now, okay? Right. The people that we can point to now, and you admit that very few of them would self-sacrifice themselves for the group, especially for a stranger in that group if they didn't know who it is. But we know more than enough people that would probably rob from their next door neighbor if they felt that they can get away with it.
Wait a second, Sokka. No. Let me finish.
What do you mean let you finish? I'm talking.
I thought I was talking. So, okay, go ahead. Sorry if I stepped on you.
No.
I thought it was my turn. Go ahead.
So the point is that just by looking at where we are now, we have more people that would actually engage in probably the behavior that you don't want, that we consider wrong, and less people that produce that are doing the behavior that we would consider right. And if you want to talk about the outliers here, what behavior had a greater chance of being passed on, the altruistic one or the one that allows you to get away in groups? And if we have a large representation of that one, then evolution selected probably for the bad behavior, and the altruistic ones are the outliers.
Sokka, but and again, I don't think you've done this on purpose, but you've moved the goalpost. In that, we have moved.
I have not moved the goalpost.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Then show me I'm wrong. Because what I'm talking about is when I'm looking at a group of individuals. If it is my tribe, if it is the people that I trust, the people I like, the people that I consider part of, quote unquote, my clan, which is probably less than 25 to 50 people, I can guarantee you that the vast majority of people are not going to steal or try to get over on those individuals. Now, if I look at people that I don't associate with, my neighbors, let's say that I don't know them well, I don't consider friends, I don't consider whatever, they're not part of my clan, which is exactly what we would expect to see, because back in the day when there were specific tribal groups competing for resources, yes, that's an advantage to go steal from the others, but not from your own. And that's why I'm saying if we're looking at society now, the problem is not that we are not intrinsically altruistic to our own. We have changed in that we don't consider our neighbors our own, and therefore getting over on them is an advantage, as it would be if you're on the plains and the next tribe over has more food than you. That makes perfect sense.
Okay. So, for one, the position that I've been putting out here since the beginning is that everything is selected in you have a greater chance of selecting for self-interest than for things like altruism. Okay. And then we provide an example of how, the behaviors that we exhibit would be more in line with, breaking, going against altruism so that we can do things out of self-interest. That's not moving the goalpost. But to the example that you're putting out there, or that if you're going to say that it comes down to basic just tribalism, that we have a closer, that we're going to be more altruistic with our immediate group compared to the farther group. Well, again, out of self-interest, it's a risk versus reward thing. The chances of you being found out for doing something like this in your immediate group is going to be higher compared to doing it to a complete stranger. So still out of self-interest, that could be the yes, of course. It makes just as you can say no, but it makes just as much sense as
let me explain why.
Put out there.
Let me explain why.
Okay,
because
hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, is it possible that the reason why you see more actions of altruism within your immediate inner group is because you have a higher risk of being caught out by your immediate group and risk ostracization, that the risk is greater within the immediate group rather than the larger group? Is that possible? That can be selected for?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So it might be what you said, but it also might be what I said.
Okay,
So
and I've never wait a second. If I've miscategorized or miscolored this as an absolutist statement and that you cannot be wrong, then I apologize. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I think there's just as much evidence, honestly, I think there's more, that would show that within a herd, within a tribe, whatever you want to break that down into, the self-sacrifice that the individuals demonstrate would tend to convince me or be evidence for altruism, at least within that group, is selected for more than selfishness.
I mean, that's your conclusion. That's what you're putting out there. But the issue is that everything that I've presented, everything that I've said in rebuttal to that, is evolutionary reasons that can be explained exactly the same observed phenomenon, which would lead into a result of not altruism. What I'm saying is that when you say something like evolution provides us the foundation for this, well, it does, but that's only from the sugar-coated version that you want to put out there. It's entirely possible that evolution selected for self-interest, egotism, like that. The species, the people that survive the most are the ones that were able to get away with more. And now, it's just as plausible that somebody could present that as one. And the only argument that you have against that is, well, I don't think that's the case. I think it's more likely this way.
What I would put forth there is explain people of the clique, people of the tribe, literally sacrificing themselves. People walking up and, sacrificing themselves on altars because
This is the explanation for
and
that.
Sokka, in all bluntness, you're doing exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. No, that's Ned. Yes, I am doing the exact same thing on the opposite side to show that you can sugarcoat it whatever way you want, but there's no definitive answer that shows that evolution plays any way in any type of altruistic behavior that we
And
have.
again,
what I'm showing here is that there's just as likely an explanation that the behaviors we have now and observe now are based purely on self-interest and not on altruism at all.
Okay,
but if
so
you
let's
want to make an argument based on from evolution, it's basically special pleading. It's this idea that that your concept of how these things developed was this idea that it comes from these altruistic routes, deep down in the way that we evolved. When it could easily be not the case to do that through every single example that I've brought up.
And every example I brought up is just as much evidence that it could be.
So
And
what
if you
happens?
wanna say-
What happens when the behaviors that we see now, can be, it can go both ways? Is there falsifiability now in any type of position that you have, other than just hopeful wishing that it was this way?
That's why I provide peer-reviewed scientific papers from people who do this for a living, and they've come to this conclusion. That's whereas my superficial understanding of this and my inability to dig much deeper than the surface, granted, is going to be insufficient to defend this to the level of someone who takes your position. But if I am defending, let's say, evolution, I think that, and maybe I can't get there, but I think that even if evolution were to select for, like you're positing, selfish behavior, I still think that I could get us to a moral system based off of that. So it wouldn't matter which way evolution selected for. Morality would still be an emergent property from either side. Now, granted, I got to take some more thought, but I've got some ideas kind of swimming around in here that I need to ferret out. Whereas, number one, at least I have a way to defend the foundations. Whereas Christianity, I think, again, tell me if that video is off. And granted, maybe I did, put too much into that. But I honestly think that definitively demonstrates that you cannot have not one, not two, but all three legs.
So what happens when your Christian interlocutor, comes out and says, "What the hell are you talking about? I'm a natural law theorist."
Okay, then my argument doesn't pertain to you. It's that simple. It's the same thing as if an atheist comes to me and says, "Yeah, of course not. That doesn't make sense." And I'll put it this way: all a Christian would have to do is take one of the omnis away from their God, and that argument completely evaporates. And literally any of those omnis, more or less, if they constrain their God in any way, if he's not timeless, if he's not all-knowing, if he's not all-powerful, he's not all, well, he could actually be all good or all bad and still work. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have control of the plan. Any of those, that argument is no longer applicable. But they're not going to do that.
What happens if the greatest moral good in God's mind is to act people of their own free will? That before, what trumps all other moral facts out there is that personal autonomy is the most important thing.
I need to think about that for a second. I don't know. Again, I need to play with that, because my gut reaction is to say, so what? Because again, it's his plan, and this personal autonomy that he's giving us, he knows that it will be used by each of us in the way that it's going to be used. And he must approve of the way that it's being used on an individualistic basis or he wouldn't allow it. He couldn't allow it. I mean, again, if he is an omni God and he wants something to happen, it would have to happen. Now, again, I mean, I would say you're looking more as a passive God at that point. I set the